the immense waters of the great flood began to recede. God had cleansed the earth. Noah and his family stepped out of the ark and began a new world. And for generations, humanity believed that the race of giants and every trace of them had been completely swept away. But do not forget, the prophecy of Enoch in chapter 15 warned humanity long ago that the evil spirits released from the bodies of the Nephilim giants would continue wandering across the earth, bringing calamity upon humanity until the day of final judgment. Genesis chapter 6 verse 4 also says that the Nephilim appeared in those days and also afterward. So did the great flood truly bring the age of the giants to an end. What continued to exist after the waters receded? And why many generations after Noah does the Bible still mention the Anakim, the Rephaim, and other races of towering people who made the Israelite warriors feel as small as grasshoppers? Something even stranger lies on the other side of the Mediterranean. The Greeks also preserved stories about races of giants with supernatural origins, possessing strength far beyond that of human beings, living outside the law and devouring anyone who entered their territory. The most famous among them was Polyphemus, the One-Eyed Cyclops, encountered by Odysseus in the Odyssey. He lived inside a stone cave, raised sheep-made cheese, and spoke human language. But the boulder he used to block the cave entrance was so enormous that even several wagons would have struggled to move it. Homer also identifies Polyphemus as the son of Poseidon and the sea goddess Thoosa. When the men of Odysseus entered the cave, Polyphemus seized them, smashed them against the stone floor, and devoured both their flesh and the marrow of their bones. Those details correspond so closely with the record of the Nephilim in the book of Enoch that it is difficult to regard them as a simple coincidence. A supernatural origin, an enormous body, strength far beyond that of human beings, a lawless existence, and the practice of cannibalism. So was Polyphemus merely a creature invented by Homer to make the story more compelling? Or were the Cyclops the surviving descendants of the Nephilim after the great flood wandering through ancient Greece? Welcome to Kyros Codex. In this video, we will reopen Enoch's forgotten record, trace the evidence of the Nephilim after the flood, and investigate whether Homer's one-eyed giant truly belonged to that ancient bloodline. Enoch's prophecy and the entities that survived after the flood. It all begins with the text of 1 Enoch. The opening section, titled "The Book of the Watchers," preserves the origin of this mystery, extending from chapter 1 through chapter 36. The epicenter of the rebellion erupts most violently from chapter 6 through chapter 16. The story reaches back to the age of Jared, long before Noah appeared. Humanity multiplied across the earth. Women of radiant beauty were born. From above the firmament, the host of angelic watchers looked down. They desired that mortal beauty and decided to descend to earth, seizing the daughters of men as their wives. Chapter 6. And it came to pass, when the children of men had multiplied, that in those days were born unto them beautiful and comely daughters. And the angels, the children of the heaven, saw and lusted after them, and said to one another, Come, let us choose us wives from among the children of men, and beget us children. And Semjaza, who was their leader, said unto them, I fear ye will not indeed agree to do this deed, and I alone shall have to pay the penalty of a great sin. And they all answered him and said, Let us all swear an oath, and all bind ourselves by mutual imprecations, not to abandon this plan, but to do this thing. Then swear they all together, and bound themselves by mutual imprecations upon it. And they were in all 200 who descended in the days of Jared on the summit of Mount Hermon. And they called it Mount Hermon, because they had sworn and bound themselves by mutual imprecations upon it. And these are the names of their leaders: Samlazaz, their leader, Arakelba Ramael, Kokablel Tamlel, Ramlel, Ezekiel, Barakijal, Asael, Armaros, Batarel, Ananel, Zachiel, Samsapel, Satarel, Turel, Jomjael, Sariel. These are their chiefs of tens. Chapter 7. And all the others together with them took unto themselves wives, and each chose for himself one. And they began to go in unto them, and to defile themselves with them. And they taught them charms and enchantments, and the cutting of roots, and made them acquainted with plants. And they became pregnant, and they bare great giants, whose height was 3,000 ells, who consumed all the acquisitions of men. And when men could no longer sustain them, the giants turned against them and devoured mankind. And they began to sin against birds and beasts and reptiles and fish, and to devour one another's flesh and drink the blood. Then the earth laid accusation against the lawless ones. Chapter 8. And Azazel taught men to make swords and knives and shields and breastplates, and made known to them the metals of the earth and the art of working them, and bracelets and ornaments, and the use of antimony and the beautifying of the eyelids, and all kinds of costly stones and all coloring tinctures. And there arose much godlessness, and they committed fornication, and they were led astray and became corrupt in all their ways. Semjaza taught enchantments and root cuttings. Armaros, the resolving of enchantments. Barakijal taught astrology. Kokabel, the constellations. Ezekiel, the knowledge of the clouds. Arakiel, the signs of the earth. Shamsiel, the signs of the sun, and Sariel, the course of the moon. And as men perished, they cried, and their cry went up to heaven. Chapter 9. And then Michael, Uriel, Raphael, and Gabriel looked down from heaven, and saw much blood being shed upon the earth, and all lawlessness being wrought upon the earth. And they said one to another, the earth made without inhabitant cries, the voice of their crying stopped to the gates of heaven. And now to you, the holy ones of heaven, the souls of men make their suit, saying, bring our cause before the Most High. And they said to the Lord of the ages, Lord of lords, God of gods, King of kings, and God of the ages, the throne of thy glory standeth unto all the generations of the ages, and thy name holy and glorious, and blessed unto all the ages. Thou hast made all things, and power over all things hast thou, and all things are naked and open in thy sight. And thou seest all things, and nothing can hide itself from thee. Thou seest what Azazel hath done, who hath taught all unrighteousness on earth, and revealed the eternal secrets which were preserved in heaven, which men were striving to learn. And Semjaza, to whom thou hast given authority to bear rule over his associates. And they have gone to the daughters of men upon the earth, and have slept with the women, and have defiled themselves, and revealed to them all kinds of sins. And the women have borne giants, and the whole earth has thereby been filled with blood and unrighteousness. And now, behold, the souls of those who have died are crying and making their suit to the gates of heaven, and their lamentations have ascended and cannot cease because of the lawless deeds which are wrought on the earth. And thou knowest all things before they come to pass, and thou seest these things, and thou dost suffer them. And thou dost not say to us what we are to do to them in regard to these. Chapter 10. Then said the Most High, the Holy and Great One spake, and sent Uriel to the son of Lamech, and said to him, go to Noah, and tell him in my name, hide thyself, and reveal to him the end that is approaching, that the whole earth will be destroyed. And a deluge is about to come upon the whole earth, and will destroy all that is on it. And now, instruct him that he may escape, and his seed may be preserved for all the generations of the world. And again the Lord said to Raphael, bind Azazel hand and foot, and cast him into the darkness, and make an opening in the desert, which is in Dudael, and cast him therein. And place upon him rough and jagged rocks, and cover him with darkness, and let him abide there forever, and cover his face that he may not see light. And on the day of this great judgment he shall be cast into the fire, and heal the earth which the angels have corrupted, and proclaim the healing of the earth, that they may heal the plague, and that all the children of men may not perish through all the secret things that the watchers have disclosed and have taught their sons. And the whole earth has been corrupted through the works that were taught by Azazel to him ascribe all sin. And to Gabriel said the Lord, proceed against the bastards and the reprobates, and against the children of fornication, and destroy the children of fornication, and the children of the watchers from amongst men, and cause them to go forth. Send them one against the other, that they may destroy each other in battle. For length of days shall they not have. And no request that they that is their fathers make of thee shall be granted unto their fathers on their behalf. For they hope to live an eternal life, and that each one of them will live 500 years. And the Lord said unto Michael, Go bind Semjaza and his associates, who have united themselves with women, so as to have defiled themselves with them in all their uncleanness. And when their sons have slain one another, and they have seen the destruction of their beloved ones, bind them fast for 70 generations, in the valleys of the earth, till the day of their judgment and of their consummation, till the judgment that is forever and ever is consummated. In those days they shall be led off to the abyss of fire, and to the torment and the prison in which they shall be confined forever. And whosoever shall be condemned and destroyed will from thenceforth be bound together with them to the end of all generations. And destroy all the spirits of the reprobate and the children of the watchers, because they have wronged mankind. Destroy all wrong from the face of the earth, and let every evil work come to an end, and let the plant of righteousness and truth appear, and it shall prove a blessing. The works of righteousness and truth shall be planted in truth and joy forevermore. And then shall all the righteous escape, and shall live till they beget thousands of children. And all the days of their youth and their old age shall they complete in peace. And then shall the whole earth be tilled in righteousness, and shall all be planted with trees, and be full of blessing. And all desirable trees shall be planted on it, and they shall plant vines on it, and the vine which they plant thereon shall yield wine in abundance. And as for all the seed which is sown thereon, each measure of it shall bear 1,000, and each measure of olives shall yield 10 presses of oil. And cleanse thou the earth from all oppression, and from all unrighteousness, and from all sin, and from all godlessness, and all the uncleanness that is wrought upon the earth. Destroy from off the earth. And all the children of men shall become righteous, and all nations shall offer adoration, and shall praise me, and all shall worship me. And the earth shall be cleansed from all defilement, and from all sin, and from all punishment, and from all torment. And I will never again send them upon it from generation to generation, and forever. Chapter 11. And in those days I will open the store chambers of blessing, which are in the heaven, so as to send them down upon the earth, over the work and labor of the children of men. And truth and peace shall be associated together throughout all the days of the world, and throughout all the generations of men. Chapter 12. Before these things Enoch was hidden, and no one of the children of men knew where he was hidden, and where he abode, and what had become of him. And his activities had to do with the watchers, and his days were with the holy ones. And I, Enoch, was blessing the Lord of majesty, and the King of the ages. And lo, the watchers called me Enoch the scribe, and said to me, Enoch, thou scribe of righteousness, go declare to the watchers of the heaven, who have left the high heaven, the holy eternal place, and have defiled themselves with women, and have done as the children of earth do, and have taken unto themselves wives. Ye have wrought great destruction on the earth, and ye shall have no peace nor forgiveness of sin. And inasmuch as they delight themselves in their children, the murder of their beloved ones shall they see, and over the destruction of their children shall they lament, and shall make supplication unto eternity. But mercy and peace shall ye not attain. Chapter 13. And Enoch went and said, Azazel, thou shalt have no peace. A severe sentence has gone forth against thee, to put thee in bonds. And thou shalt not have toleration nor request granted to thee, because of the unrighteousness which thou hast taught. and because of all the works of godlessness and unrighteousness and sin which thou hast shown to men. Then I went and spoke to them all together, and they were all afraid, and fear and trembling seized them. And they besought me to draw up a petition for them, that they might find forgiveness, and to read their petition in the presence of the Lord of heaven. For from thenceforward they could not speak with him, nor lift up their eyes to heaven, for shame of their sins, for which they had been condemned. Then I wrote out their petition and the prayer in regard to their spirits and their deeds, individually, and in regard to their requests, that they should have forgiveness and length. And I went off and sat down at the waters of Dan, in the land of Dan, to the south of the west of Hermon. I read their petition till I fell asleep. And behold, a dream came to me, and visions fell down upon me, and I saw visions of chastisement. And a voice came bidding me to tell it to the sons of heaven, and reprimand them. And when I awaked, I came unto them, and they were all sitting gathered together weeping in Abel's jail, which is between Lebanon and Sennacer, with their faces covered. And I recounted before them all the visions which I had seen in sleep, and I began to speak the words of righteousness, and to reprimand the heavenly watchers. Chapter 14. The book of the words of righteousness, and of the reprimand of the eternal watchers, in accordance with the command of the Holy Great One. In that vision, I saw in my sleep what I will now say with a tongue of flesh, and with the breath of my mouth, which the Great One has given to men to converse therewith, and understand with the heart, as he has created and given to man the power of understanding the word of wisdom. So hath he created me also, and given me the power of reprimanding the watchers, the children of heaven. I wrote out your petition, and in my vision it appeared thus, that your petition will not be granted unto you throughout all the days of eternity, and that judgment has been finally passed upon you. Yea, your petition will not be granted unto you. And from henceforth you shall not ascend into heaven unto all eternity, and in bonds of the earth the decree has gone forth to bind you for all the days of the world. And previously you shall have seen the destruction of your beloved sons, and ye shall have no pleasure in them, but they shall fall before you by the sword. And your petition on their behalf shall not be granted, nor yet on your own, even though you weep and pray, and speak all the words contained in the writing which I have written. And the vision was shown to me thus. Behold, in the vision, clouds invited me, and a mist summoned me, and the course of the stars and the lightnings sped and hastened me. And the winds in the vision caused me to fly, and lifted me upward, and bore me into heaven. And I went in till I drew nigh to a wall which is built of crystals, and surrounded by tongues of fire, and it began to affright me. And I went into the tongues of fire, and drew nigh to a large house which was built of crystals. And the walls of the house were like a tessellated floor made of crystals, and its groundwork was of crystal. Its ceiling was like the path of the stars and the lightnings, and between them were fiery cherubim, and their heaven was clear as water. A flaming fire surrounded the walls, and its portals blazed with fire. And I entered into that house, and it was hot as fire and cold as ice. There were no delights of life therein. Fear covered me, and trembling got hold upon me. And as I quaked and trembled, I fell upon my face. And I beheld a vision, and lo, there was a second house greater than the former, and the entire portal stood open before me, and it was built of flames of fire. And in every respect, it so excelled in splendor and magnificence and extent, that I cannot describe to you its splendor and its extent. And its floor was of fire, and above it were lightnings, and the path of the stars. And its ceiling also was flaming fire. And I looked and saw therein a lofty throne. Its appearance was as crystal, and the wheels thereof as the shining sun. And there was the vision of cherubim. And from underneath the throne came streams of flaming fire, so that I could not look thereon. And the great glory sat thereon, and his raiment shone more brightly than the sun, and was whiter than any snow. None of the angels could enter, and could behold his face, by reason of the magnificence and glory, and no flesh could behold him. The flaming fire was round about him, and a great fire stood before him, and none around could draw nigh him. 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him, yet he needed no counselor. And the most holy ones who were nigh to him did not leave by night nor depart from him. And until then, I had been prostrate on my face trembling, and the Lord called me with his own mouth, and said to me, Come hither, Enoch, and hear my word. And one of the holy ones came to me and waked me, and he made me rise up and approach the door. And I bowed my face downwards. Chapter 15. And he answered and said to me, and I heard his voice, Fear not, Enoch, thou righteous man, and scribe of righteousness. Approach hither and hear my voice. And go say to the watchers of heaven, who have sent thee to intercede for them, You should intercede for men, and not men for you. Wherefore have ye left the high, holy, and eternal heaven, and lain with women, and defiled yourselves with the daughters of men, and taken to yourselves wives, and done like the children of earth, and begotten giants as your sons. And though ye were holy spiritual living, the eternal life, you have defiled yourselves with the blood of women, and have begotten children with the blood of flesh. And as the children of men have lusted after flesh and blood, as those also do who die and perish. Therefore have I given them wives also, that they might impregnate them, and beget children by them, that thus nothing might be wanting to them on earth. But you were formerly spiritual, living the eternal life and immortal for all generations of the world. And therefore I have not appointed wives for you, for as for the spiritual ones of the heaven in heaven is their dwelling. And now the giants who are produced from the spirits and flesh shall be called evil spirits upon the earth, and on the earth shall be their dwelling. Evil spirits have proceeded from their bodies, because they are born from men. And from the holy watchers is their beginning and primal origin. They shall be evil spirits on earth, and evil spirits shall they be called. As for the spirits of heaven in heaven shall be their dwelling, but as for the spirits of the earth which were born upon the earth, on the earth shall be their dwelling. And the spirits of the giants afflict, oppress, destroy, attack, do battle, and work destruction on the earth, and cause trouble. They take no food, but nevertheless hunger and thirst, and cause offenses. And these spirits shall rise up against the children of men and against the women, because they have proceeded from them. Chapter 16. From the days of the slaughter and destruction and death of the giants, from the souls of whose flesh the spirits having gone forth, shall destroy without incurring judgment. Thus shall they destroy until the day of the consummation, the great judgment, in which the age shall be consummated over the watchers, and the godless, yea, shall be wholly consummated. And now, as to the watchers who have sent thee to intercede for them, who had been aforetime in heaven, say to them, You have been in heaven, but all the mysteries had not yet been revealed to you, and you knew worthless ones, and these in the hardness of your hearts you have made known to the women. And through these mysteries, women and men work much evil on earth. Say to them, therefore, you have no peace. It is clear that Semjaza was the leader of the group of rebellious angels. He also understood that this act would inevitably bring severe punishment from the Most High. He feared that his companions would lose their courage and flee halfway through, leaving him to bear all the blame alone. To tighten their bond of loyalty, Semjaza forced every member to bind their fates together through a blood covenant. 1 Enoch, chapter 6 confirms that 200 watchers took part. They were all guardian angels personally assigned by God to watch over humanity. But now, they had betrayed God and descended together directly onto the summit of Mount Hermon during the age of Jared. In this cold, rocky mountain region, they swore a terrible oath to carry out their plan to the very end. Anyone who turned back would immediately suffer the most brutal curses. The moment the blood fell, the rebellion officially became an organized campaign of invasion. 200 watchers openly trampled upon the sacred boundary. They seized mortal women, had physical relations with them, and took them as wives. At the same time, they filled the minds of humanity with dark forms of sorcery that exceeded the limits of what human beings could endure. Semjaza spread the knowledge of magical spells and the methods of forcing roots to release poisons. Azazel taught humanity how to dig into the earth and melt metal to forge swords, daggers, shields, and iron armor. The others manipulated the heavens, teaching people how to read the stars and bend the laws of nature. Meanwhile, vulnerable human beings showed no caution and instead regarded this knowledge as treasure. They competed with one another to seize this new source of knowledge. They used sharpened swords to satisfy their thirst for power and plunged the world into massacres. Amid this rising tide of violence, the most devastating event occurred. The women became pregnant. They carried and gave birth to a violent race of giants. The translation by R.H. Charles confirms in Chapter 7 the appearance of a race possessing gigantic physical bodies. The Greek and Ethiopic manuscripts record varying figures concerning their size. Setting aside the disputes over their height, the historical record shines a direct light upon the chain of brutal acts committed by these creatures. During the first stage, the giants devoured everything produced through human labor. They stripped the fertile fields, livestock herds, and food stores bare. The speed of their destruction completely exhausted the ability of the surrounding communities to supply them. As soon as the food supply reached its limit, the monsters turned against the very people who had fed them. The translation of 1 Enoch chapter 7 clearly states that they devoured everything humanity had produced, using the original words, consumed all the acquisitions of men. Immediately afterward, the record confirms the brutal truth: the giants turned against them and devoured mankind. The giants chewed up and consumed humanity itself. Their brutality continued to spread across all living things. The giants tore apart birds, wild animals, reptiles, and even fish and other creatures of the water. The height of their corruption appeared in the scene of them tearing one another's flesh apart and drinking the fresh blood of their own kind. By the end of chapter 7, life upon the earth had been completely shattered beneath the feet of the monsters. This level of destruction directly brought down the severe punishment of the Most High. The giants possessed physical bodies of flesh and bone. They were hybrid offspring produced by the host of watchers and human women. This race trampled across the earth, ravaged the food supply, slaughtered humanity, and ultimately suffered a fatal outpouring of divine wrath. The flood completely buried their physical bodies, while also opening the way for an even more violent calamity. In chapter 15, God speaks directly to Enoch, revealing the origin of a new dark power that would continue to haunt the earth. According to the translation by R.H. Charles, verse 8 of chapter 15 makes this forceful declaration: "The giants shall be called evil spirits upon the earth," meaning the giants will be called evil spirits upon the earth. The following line reveals exactly what these creatures are. Evil spirits have proceeded from their bodies, meaning evil spirits have come forth from their bodies. This declaration unlocks the entire mystery. History clearly confirms that the bodies of the giants were reduced to the soil, yet their life force stubbornly remained in the earthly realm. Dark spirits seeped out from those masses of dead flesh and continued to manipulate the world. First, Enoch directly reveals the nature of these evil spirits. The host of watchers originally consisted of beings belonging to the heavenly realm. Mortal women possessed bodies made of earthly flesh and blood. The hybrid children of these two races carried a structure that blended a spiritual nature with biological matter. At the moment their gigantic bodies were crushed, their malformed spirits lost the right to enter the eternal realm. Entirely different from human souls, their only field of activity was confined to the earth. The remainder of chapter 15 describes how this dark force operates. The translation by R.H. Charles uses a series of verbs describing physical actions they afflict: oppress, destroy, attack, continually causing suffering, crushing, destroying, and attacking. These spirits actively provoke conflict, create chaos, and wage war against humanity. Their spiritual constitution removes the mechanism through which physical food is chewed and consumed. Yet, the ancient record still describes them as continually writhing under the torment of maddening hunger and thirst. The divine declaration continues into the opening section of chapter 16, according to the sectional structure used by R.H. Charles. The duration of the evil spirit's existence appears in verse 1. The text confirms a historical truth. From the moment the giants fell, the evil spirits that escaped from their remains continued spreading calamity until the day of the final judgment. Every detail now fits together perfectly. Chapter 15 explains the origin and methods of operation of the evil spirits that seeped from the corpses of the giants. Immediately afterward, Chapter 16 limits the period of their destructive activity to the moment when the Most High delivers his judgment. The Great Flood completely crushed the physical bodies of the ancient generation of Nephilim. But at the same time, their evil spirits continue to spread and cling to the earth. According to the revelations contained in 1st Enoch, this is the original record explaining the birth of the evil spiritual force that continually longs to torment humanity. At this point, we need to draw a firm boundary. Enoch chapter 15 focuses entirely on evil spirits. This ancient text remains silent about those evil spirits producing the race of one-eyed giants known as the Cyclops. The record never identifies the giant Polyphemus as a Nephilim. The document also excludes the theory that these spirits created a new biological bloodline after the flood. The central focus of the account points directly toward the existence of spiritual beings. Tracing the continuation of bloodlines, genetic material, or physical structures belongs to a different archive. Drawing a clear distinction around this truth ensures that the investigation remains focused on its proper target. Whenever we open Enoch chapter 15, we are confronting the world of evil spirits directly. To trace the evidence of flesh and blood giants who rose after the flood, we must turn to other historical documents. At this turning point, the complexity of history increases sharply. While the text of 1st Enoch addresses the fate of the spirits, the biblical record provides a shocking piece of physical evidence. The Bible confirms the appearance of giant communities many generations after the time of Noah. They possessed enormous physical bodies. They established family systems. They occupied vast territories. Some groups even constructed fortified strongholds and raised brutal rulers to the status of kings. This truth confronts us with an even greater question. The flood crushed the entire original generation of giants. So where did the roots of the giant races that arose afterward come from? The answer lies beyond the scope of Enoch chapter 15. The sharpest clue is hidden within an extremely brief line in Genesis chapter 6. Most people pass over this detail and miss one of the most important pieces of evidence in history. The entire horrifying truth is compressed into only 4 words, and also after that. These 4 words appear in Genesis chapter 6 verse 4. The passage that introduces the Nephilim just before the flood swallowed the world. The text recounts how the sons of God descended to earth and took women as their wives. From this union, children were born alongside the presence of the Nephilim. History remembered them as the mighty men of ancient times, warriors who built blood-soaked reputations. Yet the sentence delivers one shocking detail. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also after that. This line pushes the historical timeline beyond the original period. Genesis ends its account at this exact point. The record leaves entirely unanswered how a race of giants continued to multiply after the world had been swept by water. Genesis provides the clue. Immediately afterward, Numbers takes us directly to the scene. Many generations had passed since Noah stepped out of the ark. Under the leadership of Moses, the people of Israel left Egypt and advanced into the wilderness of Paran, near the border of Canaan. The promised land of their ancestors was opening before their eyes. Before sending the army in, Moses selected 12 outstanding men, with each tribe appointing one leader as its representative. The command was extremely clear. Enter the territory, examine the quality of the land. Evaluate the cities, measure the strength of the inhabitants, and bring back samples of its produce. Moses needed concrete information. He instructed the spies to determine whether the enemy population was large or small, and whether the cities were protected by strong stone fortifications or consisted only of temporary encampments. The 12 men left the main camp and began a reconnaissance mission that lasted exactly 40 days. They crossed the barren wilderness of Zin in the south, penetrated deep into the heart of Canaan, and reached as far as the region of Rehob in the north. Along the way, the spies entered Hebron, an ancient city nestled among the hills of the territory later associated with the tribe of Judah. There, they came face to face with 3 individuals whose names were specifically recorded: Ahiman Shashai and Talmai. Numbers clearly identifies all 3 as descendants of Enoch. The Bible does not provide detailed descriptions of their faces or the exact height of each man. Instead, the record preserves their personal names as evidence that the Anakim were a flesh and blood family with a clearly defined place of residence in Hebron, far beyond the realm of vague oral legends. After completing their observations, the spies traveled to the valley of Eshcol. There, they cut down an enormous cluster of grapes and placed it on a pole so that 2 grown men could carry it together. They also gathered pomegranates and figs to bring back. This produce offered undeniable physical evidence of the fertility of Canaan. After 40 long days, the 12 men returned to the camp at Kadesh. They stood before Moses, Aaron, and the entire community of Israel laid the heavy clusters of fruit on the ground and began their report. The opening was filled with hope. They confirmed that the land truly flowed with milk and honey, and that its harvests were abundant exactly as promised. But immediately afterward, the atmosphere changed. The cities emerged in their account as enormous fortresses armored with strong stone walls. The inhabitants of the region possessed overwhelming strength. The Amalekites occupied the south. The Hittites, Jebusites, and Amorites held the rugged hill country. The Canaanites controlled the entire coastal region and the Jordan Valley. And in Hebron, they had seen the sons of Enoch with their own eyes. This news immediately shattered the courage of the entire crowd. Caleb responded at once. He stood up and called for the people to remain calm. In a firm voice, he declared that Israel was fully capable of entering and taking possession of the land. But the other 10 spies protested together. They insisted that the inhabitants of Canaan possessed far greater strength. Their report rose to a terrifying level. They described Canaan as a land that devours its inhabitants and claimed that every person they had seen was of enormous stature. In Numbers chapter 13, verse 33, the spies delivered their most shocking declaration. There we saw the Nephilim. The sons of Enoch are from the Nephilim. They went on to describe the paralyzing feeling of standing before those beings. In our own sight, we were like grasshoppers. The name Nephilim appears exactly twice in the entire Hebrew Bible, once in Genesis chapter 6 and a second time in Numbers chapter 13. The report of the spies created a bridge connecting the ancient Nephilim with the Anakim of Canaan. Even so, we must look directly at the circumstances in which this statement was made. The spies were overwhelmed by extreme fear. They had just retreated from enormous fortified cities, experienced armies, and a line of Anakim famous for their massive stature. The feeling of being as small as grasshoppers accurately reflects their panic when facing an overwhelmingly powerful enemy. They even projected the image of grasshoppers into the eyes of the Anakim, although the record contains no account of any conversation between the 2 sides. The reality of the situation became distorted by extreme terror. The panic quickly ignited a crisis within the camp of Israel. The people cried out throughout the night. They poured their anger onto Moses and Aaron. One group even stirred up support for appointing a new leader and returning to Egypt. Joshua and Caleb tore their garments and stepped forward before the crowd. The 2 men firmly defended the fertility of Canaan. They acknowledged the strength of the native inhabitants, yet completely rejected the conclusion that defeat was inevitable. The central conflict arose from cowardice rather than from a debate over the existence of the Anakim. Caleb and Joshua had both participated in the reconnaissance mission. They agreed that they had seen unusually large people at Hebron fortified cities and the military power of Canaan. What they opposed was the people's weakness and their rejection of God's promise. Numbers chapter 14 brands the account of the other 10 men as an evil report. Those who incited the rebellion immediately paid with their lives under divine judgment, while Joshua and Caleb survived. This event reveals the true nature of the statement, "We saw the Nephilim." It was testimony distorted by panic. The report preserved one essential truth: a community known as the Anakim lived in Hebron and possessed extraordinary stature and strength. The way the spies exaggerated their scale clearly exposed their fear. Their claim that the Anakim were direct descendants of the Nephilim arose entirely from the interpretation of these frightened men. The Bible preserves their report, yet provides no genealogy connecting the Nephilim before the flood to Enoch after the flood. Despite this, the Anakim continued to remain upon the earth. Decades later, when Israel advanced into Canaan, the book of Joshua again confirmed the presence of Ahiman, Sheshai, and Talmai in Hebron. Caleb received the city as his inheritance and personally took up the sword to drive these 3 Anakim clans from the land. Joshua chapter 11 describes in detail the campaign against the Anakim in Hebron, Debir, Anab, and the surrounding hill country. This proves that the Anakim were a real community with names, territories, and individuals who appeared across multiple periods of biblical history. Their existence extended far beyond the exaggerations of a group of terrified spies. Biblical tradition describes them as a tall race that occupied walled cities and spread terror throughout Canaan. Deuteronomy preserves a saying used by the neighboring peoples, "Who can stand before the sons of Enoch?" That was how the ancient world remembered the strength of the Anakim. By this point, 2 historical markers have emerged clearly. Before the Great Flood, Genesis mentions the Nephilim together with the mysterious phrase, "and also after that." After the flood, Numbers preserves the record of the giant people known as the Anakim. The Israelite spies directly used the name Nephilim to describe them. The Bible leaves unanswered how this people reappeared. The record says nothing about any Nephilim surviving aboard Noah's Ark. The text also provides no account of a second union between angels and women. The Bible presents exactly 2 blocks of evidence. Positioned at opposite ends of history, the Nephilim existed before the judgment by water, and traditions of giants continued through successive generations in Canaan. The gap between these 2 points in time became a mystery that has fascinated readers for thousands of years. But now, the map of evidence expands beyond Canaan. The Anakim were only one branch among the giant peoples named in the Bible. Moving east of the Jordan River, the ancient texts repeatedly identify the Emim, the Zamzumim, and the Rephaim. One of them rose to rule an entire kingdom. His name was Og, king of Bashan. The Nephilim before the flood were rooted in Genesis. The Anakim after the flood occupied Hebron. The Rephaim controlled the land east of the Jordan. When these locations are connected, the migration route of the giant races comes fully into view. The path begins at Mount Hermon, crosses Bashan, descends into the hills of Hebron, and extends toward the coastlines that connected Canaan with the Greek world. This blood-soaked route forces us to confront an enormous question. Did the story of this abnormal race end in Canaan? Or did they continue along the trade routes traveled by seafaring vessels, eventually appearing within the world of Homer under an entirely different identity? Og of Bashan, the last king of the Rephaim. The investigation into the generation of giants that existed after the flood extends far beyond the report delivered by the spies at Hebron. Moving east of the Jordan River, the Bible reveals a network of giant tribes that controlled a series of territories. The Moabites called one branch of them the Emim. Deuteronomy confirms that they possessed a large population, overwhelming strength, and enormous physical stature, just like the Anakim. The historical record places the Emim within the same ranks as the Rephaim. Traveling farther north, the Ammonites encountered a similar race known as the Zamzumim. the ancient text describes them as a great power, overwhelming in both number and stature, occupying territory that had once been controlled by the Rephaim. These records prove that the name Rephaim extended far beyond the scale of a small family living in a single city. The Bible uses this name collectively for numerous giant communities established east of the Jordan River. Although the local peoples gave them different names, the ancient text still grouped them together as the same race, notorious for its stature and brutal strength. The Emim occupied the land of Moab. The Zamzumim controlled the land of Ammon, and in Bashan itself. One branch of the Rephaim continued to dominate the region under the rule of a tyrannical king. His name was Og. The battle against Og erupted during the final years of the 40-year journey through the wilderness. Most of the generation that had once trembled before the Anakim in Canaan had already died. Moses was now leading a new generation of warriors along the eastern bank of the Jordan River, prepared to strike into the Promised Land from the side. Earlier, the Israelite army had asked Sihon, king of the Amorites, to grant them passage. Sihon refused outright and immediately mobilized his army for battle. In the end, Sihon suffered a crushing defeat, and Israel seized Heshbon along with all the surrounding territory. After completing this conquest, the Israelite army turned directly north. Their next target was Bashan. This was entirely different from an empty wasteland or a scattering of impoverished villages. Bashan was a powerful kingdom possessing a system of cities, pastures, and heavily fortified transportation routes. The supreme ruler who controlled this entire machine was Og. As soon as he sensed that the Israelites were approaching, Og launched a preemptive strike. He personally commanded his great army southward and blocked the people's advance at Edrei. Numbers chapter 21 portrays a rapid sequence of events. Og and his entire elite force came out to meet Israel in battle. This action proves that Og had organized a large-scale military campaign designed to crush the Israelite army at the very gateway of Bashan. The presence of Og placed suffocating pressure upon the entire army. Decades earlier, the mere mention of the Anakim and their stone walls had been enough to tear apart the morale of the entire Israelite camp. Now Moses and the new generation had to face a flesh-and-blood king who represented the legacy of the Rephaim line. God commanded Moses to remain firm and courageous. This command confirms that terror was operating as a psychological weapon immediately before the battle. Og possessed an army, a territory, and a reputation powerful enough to summon the specter of defeat at Kadesh once again. But this time, God declared that Og, his army, and his entire kingdom would certainly fall into the hands of Israel. Moses received the command to crush Og in the same way he had defeated Sihon. The decisive battle erupted at Edrei. The Bible describes the slaughter with extreme brevity. Og, his sons, and his entire army fell completely. Israel marched over the bodies of its enemies, entered the land, and seized the kingdom of Bashan. Deuteronomy clarifies the enormous scale of this victory. Israel successfully captured 60 cities in the region of Argob, all of which belonged to Og. Every one of these fortresses rose behind high stone walls, large gates, and strong bronze bars. Surrounding these 60 fortified cities, Bashan also maintained countless unwalled villages. This detail destroys every old stereotype concerning the Rephaim who lived after the flood. Og completely breaks away from the image of a wild giant hiding inside a cave. He was the king of a towering urban empire. His kingdom operated with capitals, fortresses, transportation networks, a standing army, and countless surrounding agricultural communities. A ruler who controlled 60 fortified cities undoubtedly possessed a sophisticated system of government. Og ruled his empire from two centers of power, Ashtaroth and Edrei. His territory covered Bashan, part of Gilead, the region of Argob Salaka, and extended all the way to the foothills of Mount Hermon. The book of Joshua clearly confirms that Og belonged to the last remaining branch of the Rephaim, and held the power of life and death over a vast territory east of the Jordan River. The name Ashtaroth had already appeared during the earliest period recorded in Genesis. Chapter 14 recounts how the Rephaim were attacked at Ashtaroth Karnaim during the age of Abraham. Countless generations later, Og continued to hold his throne at Ashtaroth and Edrei. These two passages do not preserve a genealogy connecting Og with the individual Rephaim, who lived during the time of Abraham. Even so, they provide powerful evidence that the name Rephaim had been deeply rooted in the region of Bashan since the earliest chapters of biblical history. After the bloody campaign ended, Moses divided the conquered territory among the tribes of Israel. Half of Gilead was given to the tribes of Reuben and Gad. Moses gave the other half of Gilead, along with the entire kingdom of Bashan, the former throne of Og, to the half-tribe of Manasseh. At this exact geographical location, Deuteronomy directly identifies the region of Argob in Bashan as the land of the Rephaim. This detail firmly connects the record to a real geographic location. The Rephaim step out of the world of oral tradition. In the biblical record, this race controlled a clearly defined territory, Bashan and Argob, stretching east of the Jordan River and reaching the region bordering Mount Hermon. Immediately afterward, Deuteronomy presents the most famous clue concerning Og. Chapter 3, verse 11 identifies Og, king of Bashan, as the only remaining individual from the branch of the Rephaim. The book of Joshua repeats this declaration, confirming that he was the final representative of that race in the kingdom of Bashan. We need to interpret this wording with careful judgment. The Bible places Og within the line of the Rephaim. This is a forceful statement made by the narrator, entirely different from the terrified cries of the spies. However, the statement carries a limited implication. It places Og among the remaining members of the Rephaim branch that ruled Bashan and the surrounding regions. The clearest truth is this: when Israel entered the territory east of the Jordan River, history remembered Og as the final great representative of the race that had once controlled that land. Continuing the record, the text focuses on a strange object that belonged to him, the Eres Barzel, commonly understood to mean an iron bed. This treasure was located in Rabbah of the Ammonites and remained standing after the fall of Og at Edrei. The ancient author invited readers to verify for themselves an artifact that still existed at the time the text was written. Is it not still in Rabbah of the Ammonites? The bed measured 9 cubits in length and 4 cubits in width, according to the common cubit. Converted into modern measurements, this object was approximately 4 meters long and nearly 2 meters wide. It was an enormous physical structure, a bed whose width was roughly equal to the height of a grown man and whose length was twice that of a standard bed, would certainly have made a powerful psychological impression upon anyone who saw it with their own eyes. Even so, using the dimensions of the bed as an exact measurement of Og's height lacks precision. A king could easily use an object larger than his own body. Royal craftsmen often produced oversized objects to display authority, symbolize strength, or serve spiritual ceremonies. Therefore, concluding that Og's height exactly matched the dimensions of the bed goes beyond the boundaries of the text. Furthermore, the Hebrew noun "ers" commonly means a bed or couch, but scholars have also interpreted this object as a stone coffin or sarcophagus. The Net Bible suggests that craftsmen made it from volcanic basalt, which possessed a dark color and a rough polished surface resembling metallic iron. Bashan is famous for its dark basalt stone, causing archaeologists to regard this interpretation as highly consistent with the local geology. These two perspectives present two different pictures. According to the traditional view, it was a great iron bed made specifically for a king with an enormous body. According to the archaeological view, it was a massive basalt sarcophagus, large enough to contain Og's body and preserve it as an enduring trophy of war. Whichever approach is chosen, the text still forces the reader to focus on one central truth: the object associated with Og possessed extraordinary dimensions, and the public in Rabbah knew of its existence. It served as a permanent physical witness within the account of the Rephaim king. The central importance of the record extends beyond whether the object was made of metallic iron or basalt stone. Its true value lies in the way the Bible presents the evidence. Og appears as a historical figure connected to clearly identified locations. He possessed a name, a territory, and established centers of power at Ashtaroth and Edrei. He appears as a king, ruling an enormous governmental machine in which an army, fortresses, and a network of 60 fortified cities operated smoothly beneath his authority. The historian directly placed him among the surviving Rephaim, while emphasizing the existence of an enormous artifact that members of the public could personally visit and verify. This is precisely why the record concerning Og carries far greater weight than the terrified cries about the Nephilim in Numbers chapter 13. The 10 spies told their story through cowardice. They looked upon the Anakim and reduced themselves to grasshoppers. Their cries shattered the morale of the entire Israelite camp, and the Bible directly calls their account an evil report. Og enters history by a completely different route. Traces of him run throughout the official narratives of Numbers, Deuteronomy, and Joshua. All three texts identify him as king of Bashan. The two locations of Ashtaroth and Edrei appear repeatedly. His kingdom is measured in cities and territorial area. The narrator directly confirms the connection between him and the Rephaim. This record separates Og from the generation of Nephilim that existed before the flood. The Bible does not use the name Nephilim to describe him. The text also preserves no genealogy directly connecting Og with the creatures mentioned in Genesis chapter 6. What the Bible does is firmly place Og within the Rephaim branch, a force belonging to the same category as the Anakim, the Amim, and the Zamzumim, which together formed a network of giant peoples controlling the entire eastern bank of the Jordan River. At this turning point, the mystery of the giants who lived after the flood expands into a complete geographical map. At Hebron, the three leaders Ahiman, Sheshai, and Talmai, who belonged to the Anakim, guarded fortified cities. In Moab, the memory of the power of the Emim remained deeply embedded. In Ammon, the Zamzumim rose as a numerous and enormous race, just like the Anakim. And at the height of Bashan, Og held the power of life and death over a kingdom that belonged to the Rephaim. The names changed from one region to another. The Moabites called them the Emim. The Ammonites feared the Zamzumim. The Israelites confronted the Anakim and the Rephaim. This diversity of names proves that each local population preserved its own independent memory of the brutality of the giant communities living beside them. Og stands tall at the end of this chain of memories. He casts aside the identity of a rumored character. He appears as a genuine tyrant who personally commanded armies, blocked Moses at Edrei, and defended a network of dozens of heavily fortified strongholds. The fall of Og created a historic shock. In the past, Israel had trembled at the mention of giant races and had cowardly turned away from Canaan. Now the new generation of warriors personally took up the sword against a Rephaim tyrant and seized his entire empire. The fear that had imprisoned them outside the Promised Land for decades was completely destroyed on the battlefield of Edrei. Looking back over the investigation, Og leaves behind one more decisive clue. His kingdom extended all the way to the foothills of Mount Hermon. This is precisely the location where first Enoch places the blood oath of the 200 Watchers. Enoch opens the story of the giants at Hermon. The Bible places the territory of the Rephaim directly along the eastern and southern slopes of that mountain. Extending farther south, the record points directly toward Hebron, the stronghold of the Anakim. When these locations are connected, a clear route appears: Hermon, Bashan, Argob, Hebron. And from this final point, the next stage of the route leads directly toward the Mediterranean coast. History currently provides no physical evidence that Og the Anakim or the Rephaim built ships and migrated to the Greek islands. But at this moment, Enoch's map truly functions as a sharp investigative route. The rebellion planted its flag at Hermon. The Rephaim Empire controlled the eastern bank of the Jordan River. The Anakim established themselves farther south at Hebron. And beyond the western coast, Greek sailors repeatedly told stories of giant races possessing enough strength to crush humanity. The Anakim lived at Hebron. The Rephaim controlled Bashan, and Og confronted Israel as the final tyrant king of the giant network of eastern kingdoms. So, if the traditions of enormous monsters once took root around Hermon, Bashan, and Canaan, how did an identical pattern appear within the language of the Greeks? The key to unlocking this mystery is hidden in a completely unexpected place. It is absent from the epic poem, the Odyssey. The final clue lies within the ancient Greek translation of the Bible itself, where Jewish scholars were forced to choose a single noun to define the name NEPHILIM. The lost map from Hermon to Bashan and Hebron. The fall of Og at Edrei ended the rule of the Rephaim dynasty while revealing an even greater clue. His kingdom extended all the way to the foothills of Mount Hermon. This location corresponds exactly with the site that the Book of Enoch identifies as the launching point of the rebellion carried out by the 200 Watchers. When Hermon, Bashan, Moab, and Hebron are marked on the same map, the scattered fragments of history immediately assemble into a unified whole. But first, we need to clearly define the nature of Enoch's map within this investigation. The Book of 1st Enoch preserves the location of Mount Hermon, along with a series of places that appear throughout Enoch's journey. Immediately afterward, the Bible adds Bashan, Argob, Moab, Ammon, Hebron, and the territories associated with the Anakim and the Rephaim. The map displayed on the screen is a reconstruction created from this network of ancient locations. This tool allows us to observe the overall distribution of the giant races described in ancient texts. It traces a real geographical route, providing a firm foundation for the search for biological evidence. Reconstructed from ancient texts, not an ancient cartographic artifact. Imagine that you are spreading a large parchment map across a table. Guarding the north stands Mount Hermon. Sloping down along its eastern and southern sides is the kingdom of Bashan. Traveling southward through the land east of the Jordan River, we enter Ammon and Moab. Crossing the Jordan and moving deep into the hills of Canaan, we arrive at Hebron. Looking farther west, we reach the Mediterranean Sea, the great gateway of commerce connecting the Levant with the island of Cyprus, the Aegean Sea, and the world of Greek merchant ships. Every location preserves a blood-stained fragment of history. Mount Hermon, ground zero of the rebellion. The investigative route begins at Hermon. According to 1st Enoch, chapter 6, Semjaza and the 200 Watchers descended directly onto the summit of this mountain during the age of Jared. There they sealed a blood oath binding one another with the most brutal curses to ensure that every member would carry out the plan to seize human women. The translation by R.H. Charles clearly states that the name Hermon originated directly from this blood oath. This explanation within the ancient text transforms Hermon into the absolute center of the rebellion. The mountain serves a role far greater than that of an ordinary background. It is the scene of a devastating decision. Before their descent, the intention to sin had only begun to emerge in the conversation between Semjaza and his companions. Immediately after the oath was sworn upon the summit, that plan erupted into an actual campaign of invasion. From Hermon, the angelic host poured down into the human world. As a result, the women conceived and gave birth to a malformed race. According to the Book of 1st Enoch, the chain of disasters caused by the Nephilim upon the earth began with the covenant forged on this mountain. The Hebrew Bible also presents Hermon as a crucial military boundary. Deuteronomy chapter 3 describes the territory Israel captured east of the Jordan River as extending from the Arnon Valley in the south all the way to the summit of Hermon in the north. The record notes that this mountain possessed several names. The Sidonians called it Syrian, while the Amorites called it Senir. The fact that each nation identified Hermon in its own language proves that the mountain held an enormous position within the geographical understanding of the entire Levant. This is the first point of contact between the two bodies of historical records. The Book of Enoch places the Oath of the Watchers at Hermon. Deuteronomy establishes the northern boundary of Og's empire in this same region. This perfect geographical correspondence draws the story of the Watchers and the kingdom of the Rephaim onto the same strategic map. Hermon becomes the bridge connecting the origin of the giant monsters in Enoch with the territory of the Rephaim in the Bible. From this cold mountain summit, we descend southward and move east. Our next destination is Bashan. Bashan, the war machine of the Rephaim. Deuteronomy describes Og's territory as spreading across Bashan, the region of Argob, the land of Gilead, and a network of fortified cities extending as far as Salaka and Edrei. The entire region of Argob within Bashan is called the land of the Rephaim. Og operated his kingdom from two capitals, Ashtaroth and Edrei. He possessed the power to mobilize armies from a system of 60 cities protected by stone walls, great gates, and strong bars. This detail adds flesh and substance to the historical map. The Rephaim possessed an actual territory. That territory had clearly defined boundaries. Within it operated numerous cities, communities, and centers of military power. Og stood at the summit of that system. He appears as a powerful tyrant throughout the records of Numbers, Deuteronomy, and Joshua. Joshua chapter 12 confirms that Og represented the surviving remnant of the Rephaim and ruled directly from Ashtaroth and Edrei. His territory included Bashan and extended all the way to the foothills of Mount Hermon. Bashan forms the second station along the route. Hermon preserves the memory of the Watcher's Oath. Bashan preserves the remains of a Rephaim kingdom that arose many generations after the Great Flood. The geographical distance between these two locations is extremely close, demonstrating that they belonged to the same broad cultural and ecological region in northern Transjordan. The Bible pushes the record of the Rephaim at this location even farther back than the age of Moses. In Genesis chapter 14, during the time of Abraham, the coalition led by King Chedorlaomer swept through the region and crushed the Rephaim at Ashtaroth Karnaim. The same passage identifies the Zuzim at Ham and the Emim at Shaveh Kiryataim. After hundreds of years of upheaval, Og continued to sit upon the throne at Ashtaroth itself. The repeated appearance of the names Rephaim and Ashtaroth across two different eras proves that biblical tradition firmly connected Bashan with the Rephaim from the age of the patriarchs through the time of Moses. Genesis describes a Rephaim community falling at Ashtaroth Karnaim. The book of Joshua confirms that Og ruled Ashtaroth and represented the final branch of the Rephaim. This connection is deeply rooted in the geographical memory of the Bible. The same land continued to sustain the same race across countless generations. Looking closely at Bashan's location on the map, we find it positioned near Hermon, between the eastern side of the Jordan Valley and northern Gilead. Ancient trade routes crossed this region, connecting Damascus in the north with the southern kingdoms, while opening pathways for goods from the interior to flow toward the Jordan Valley and the Mediterranean coast. Bashan also possessed fertile pastures, dense forests, and highlands rich in resources for raising livestock. An empire that controlled Bashan would possess both economic power and a vital military passage. Og ruled a land that produced gold and blood. This reality destroys the illusion of the Rephaim as a wild, wandering horde. In the biblical record, they controlled fortified cities, strategic resources, road networks, and absolute political power. From Bashan, the route on the map continues farther south. There, other giant communities carried their own distinct names, yet the Bible still placed them within the same Rephaim lineage. Ammon and Moab. Each nation preserved its own terror. Deuteronomy chapter 2 reviews the entire history of the lands through which Israel traveled east of the Jordan River. As they approached the territory of Moab, Moses mentioned a race that had once occupied that region. The Moabites called them the Emim. The text describes the Emim as a numerous people possessing brutal strength and enormous stature, just like the Anakim. History placed them among the Rephaim, although the inhabitants of Moab continued to use their local name for these enemies. As Israel continued toward the territory of Ammon, the same pattern appeared again. The Rephaim had once occupied that land, and the Ammonites called them the Zamzummim. The record again confirms that they were a giant people, numerous and as tall as the Anakim. This detail is essential to the analysis of the map. The Bible is revealing a terrifying memory fragmented among several nations. The Israelites used the name Rephaim. The Moabites called them the Emim. The Ammonites fearfully called them the Zamzummim. At Hebron, Anakim became the official identifying name. These separate names reflect the perspective of each nation that had shed blood while confronting them. Think of a great mountain range, a vast river, or a powerful warrior tribe. They often carry different names when viewed from opposite sides of national borders. Hermon was called Syrian in the language of the Sidonians and Senir in the language of the Amorites. The same entity carried multiple identities. The traditions concerning the giant races operate through the same mechanism. The names changed from one culture to another, yet their central biological characteristics remained consistent. They were numerous, brutal, enormous, and established within clearly defined territories. This consistency creates a blood-stained geographical corridor across the eastern bank of the Jordan River. Bashan is associated with Og and the Rephaim. Ammon preserves the memory of the Zamzummim. Moab trembles before the strength of the Emim. Traveling farther south and turning west, the route leads directly into the hill country of Canaan. Our next destination is Hebron. Hebron, the stronghold of the Anakim. Hebron stands deep within the southern hill country of Canaan. This city had existed since the time of Abraham and continued to hold an enormous role throughout later history. The surrounding landscape contains valleys, gentle hillsides, and fertile land ideal for growing grapes, figs, and countless valuable crops. This was also the location where the Israelite spies encountered Ahiman, Sheshai, and Talmai, the three leading figures of the Anak line. Numbers introduces the Anakim into the record through the 40-day reconnaissance mission of the 12 men. The group crossed the Negev desert, entered Hebron, and saw with their own eyes 3 Anakim families exercising power there. Returning to the camp in fear, 10 of the men independently connected the descendants of Anak with the Nephilim and compared themselves to weak grasshoppers. That report was colored by cowardice. Yet the presence of the Anakim at Hebron continued to receive confirmation from several other texts. The book of Joshua, chapter 11, establishes that the Anakim occupied Hebron, Debir, Anab, and the entire hill country of Judah. Chapter 15 records that Caleb personally received Hebron as his territory and took up the sword to drive Sheshai, Ahiman, and Talmai out of the land. This victory firmly establishes Hebron upon the map. The Anakim possessed their own name. They had clearly identified leaders. They controlled a fortified city. Their presence extended across several periods, from the reconnaissance mission during the age of Moses to the bloody campaign led by Joshua and Caleb. Hebron also carried the ancient name Kiriath Arba. The book of Joshua explains that Arba was the ancestor of Anak, firmly connecting the name of the city with the bloodline tradition of the Anakim. This is a small detail carrying enormous weight. The place name and the family name merge within the ancient text itself. The Anakim were rooted in Hebron both biologically and territorially. As our eyes move from Hermon down toward Hebron, a complete structure emerges. At the northern extreme, Hermon gave birth to the rebellion of the Watchers in 1st Enoch. Directly below it stood Bashan, the Rephaim kingdom, ruled by the tyrant Og. Along the eastern bank of the Jordan River, Moab and Ammon preserved the memories of the Emim and the Zamzummim. At the southwestern end, Hebron rose as the central stronghold of the Anakim. This entire cluster of locations is densely concentrated within the Levant and Transjordan. The map displays this territorial expansion within a single frame. However, a geographical map performs a mission entirely different from that of a biological genealogy. It identifies the locations of the traditions. It reveals the different names used by neighboring nations. It allows us to trace how memories of giant monsters survived throughout Enoch, Genesis, Numbers, Deuteronomy, and Joshua. The biological mechanism through which they continued their lineage requires an independent investigation. The ancient texts say nothing about an Anakim army building ships and departing from Hebron to establish a nation of Cyclopes. The Bible also contains no record of a Rephaim fleet setting sail from Bashan toward the islands of Homer. Therefore, this map presents a network of geographical locations and preserved memories rather than an established route of maritime migration. Drawing this clear distinction gives the next step the highest possible level of reliability. Because now the investigation is preparing to leave the mainland, the Mediterranean, where stories cross the sea. From Hebron, our view turns directly toward the setting sun. Beyond the hills of Judah and the lowland plains lies the coast of Canaan. Across the waves stand the island of Cyprus, the Aegean archipelago, and the imposing mainland of Greece. During the Late Bronze Age, the entire eastern half of the Mediterranean operated through an enormous commercial network. Dense maritime routes connected the trading center of Ugarit and the cities of the Levant with the copper mines of Cyprus, the Egyptian Empire, and the Mycenaean Kingdom of Greece. Merchant vessels constantly transported metals, finely crafted pottery, olive oil, wine, and luxury goods across these civilizations. Archaeological evidence proves that Aegean and Cypriot pottery appears in large quantities throughout the archaeological layers of the Levant. In the opposite direction, Canaanite goods also traveled aboard ships throughout the eastern Mediterranean. This physical evidence confirms the existence of an interconnected world in which coastal communities continuously encountered and exchanged with one another. Goods traveled in the hulls of ships. Sailors traveled with the goods. Place names, memories of bloody wars, stories about giant monsters, and religious traditions certainly spread through the same network of communication. This is a complete historical mechanism through which cultural motifs could cross national borders. The maritime network provides evidence of contact between the Levant and the Aegean. However, uncovering the true identity of the monster Polyphemus requires a direct examination of Homer's own text. Cultural contact provided the launching point from which legends could spread, yet a claim of shared bloodline requires specific linguistic evidence. At the coast of the Mediterranean, the line of physical evidence from biblical locations reaches its natural limit. From this point, the investigation shifts from a geographical map to a textual map. We leave behind Hebrew names such as NEPHILIM, Rephaim, and Anakim. We enter directly into the world of the Greek language, where terms such as Gigantes and Cyclopes begin to dominate the stage. This is the boundary that must remain sharply defined. The map clearly demonstrates that traditions of giant monsters in Enoch and the Bible were deeply rooted around Hermon, Bashan, Transjordan, and Canaan. Mediterranean history proves that the civilizations of the Levant and the Aegean shared an enormous network of trade and contact. The direct connection between the Anakim, the Rephaim, and the Cyclopes now rests entirely upon linguistic comparison. In practical terms, the map brings us to the very edge of the water. Language will be the vessel that carries us across the sea, and history has left behind an extremely valuable clue. Around the 3rd century before Christ, in the city of Alexandria, Jewish scholars began translating Genesis from Hebrew into Greek to create the Septuagint. They faced an extraordinary challenge, choosing a single noun that would translate Nephilim into a concept the Greeks could immediately understand. They settled upon one word, Gigantes. In the Septuagint translation of Genesis chapter 6, verse 4, the text clearly states that the Gigantes were present upon the earth in those days and also after that. This translation decision forged the first linguistic bridge leading directly from the Hebrew archive into the heart of the Greek world. It reveals one fact: Ancient Jewish scholars confidently used the very Greek word for the giants of Greek mythology to define the Nephilim. But did the Gigantes and the Cyclopes share the same origin? Why did Homer describe Polyphemus as possessing divine blood, overwhelming strength, and the habit of devouring those who entered his cave? What is the true point of contact between this one-eyed giant and the Nephilim in the Book of Enoch? The hunt for the answer officially begins with the ancient Greek Bible, the historical scene where the name Nephilim first entered the world of the Gigantes. Gigantes, the new name of the Nephilim in the Greek world. The historical map has just carried us across the cold slopes of Mount Hermon, swept through Bashan, Moab, and Ammon, driven straight down toward Hebron, and finally stopped at the edge of the Mediterranean Sea. At this coordinate geography steps away from the stage. The Hebrew texts firmly anchor the tradition of giant monsters to clearly defined physical territories. The Book of Enoch places the outbreak of the Watchers' rebellion at Hermon. Genesis fixes the Rephaim at Ashtaroth Karnaim. Deuteronomy assigns Bashan to Og Moab, to the Emim, and Ammon to the Zamzumim. Numbers and Joshua firmly secure the Anakim within the heart of Hebron. Polyphemus, however, controls an entirely different universe. Homer shaped him through the Greek language. Therefore, to launch the spear of investigation beneath the surface of the sea, we must locate an intersection between these two linguistic systems. That code is hidden inside the ancient Greek translation of the Bible. When the Hebrew record entered the Greek world, centuries after the writings of Moses first appeared in Hebrew, a vast Jewish community had taken root in Egypt under the rule of the Ptolemaic kings. By that time, Greek had risen to become the dominant means of communication throughout government, commerce, and the intellectual elite across the Eastern Mediterranean. Tens of thousands of Jews in Alexandria used Greek as the language of their daily lives. They longed for a Torah that they could read, hear, and debate in a familiar language. From that practical pressure, the project of translating the Torah from Hebrew into Greek officially began. Scholars generally agree that this earliest translation was completed around the middle to late 3rd century before Christ in the intellectual center of Alexandria. The other books underwent translation during later periods. The name Septuagint, or the 70, actually covers a vast collection of translations produced across numerous generations. Ancient tradition recounts that 72 distinguished Jewish scholars traveled from Jerusalem to Alexandria to undertake this project. That story was firmly embedded in the letter of Aristeas and accumulated many additional legendary details as it passed through history. However, the central focus of our investigation points directly toward the actual text. The Jewish translators carried a responsibility far heavier than the mechanical replacement of vocabulary. They had to dissect ancient concepts and interpret them for readers raised within an entirely different cultural environment. Every name forced them to make a decisive choice. Some Hebrew terms survived through transliteration. Cherubim became cherubim. Personal names and geographical names commonly followed the Greek alphabet in an effort to preserve their original sounds. But when the translators confronted the name Nephilim, they suddenly turned in a different direction. They settled upon a noun that the Greek people already knew by heart: Gigantes, decoding the word Nephilim in the original Hebrew text. In the original Hebrew text, the noun Nephilim appears at 2 explosive locations. The first appears in Genesis chapter 6, verse 4, immediately before the fury of the great flood erupts. The second strikes in Numbers chapter 13, verse 33, at the exact moment when the spies retreat from Canaan and report encountering the Nephilim within the territory of the Anakim. The precise etymological origin of this noun continues to ignite intense debate. Many linguistic specialists connect Nephilim with the Hebrew root NPL, carrying meanings such as to fall, to be fallen, or to cause others to fall. Other schools of analysis focus upon their stature, brutal strength, and terrifying reputation. The Hebrew text preserves the name Nephilim intact, presenting readers with a veil of mystery rather than a clear explanation. Numbers adds further pieces of context. The spies connect the Nephilim with the descendants of Enoch and humiliate themselves by comparing their own size to that of grasshoppers. This internal connection shaped the thinking of Jewish tradition, transforming the Nephilim into the embodiment of monsters possessing supernatural stature. When translating this record into Greek, the Jewish scholars faced two decisive paths. They could transliterate Nephilim directly into Greek letters and preserve its mysterious outer shell. Or they could use a Greek word capable of instantly activating the imagination of their readers. They chose the second option. This decision was entirely interpretive. In Genesis chapter 6, verse 4 of the Greek text, the sentence opens with the clause, Hoi de gigantes esan epitesges. Literally translated, the Gigantes were on the earth. The NETS, the modern scholarly translation of the Septuagint published by Oxford University Press, renders the sentence, the giants were on the earth in those days and afterward, meaning the giants were present upon the earth in those days and also afterward. The Greek text preserves the central chronological marker of this investigation. The Nephilim received the new name Gigantes, while the phrase, and also afterward, remains firmly attached to the record. Yet, the translator's strategy went far deeper than a simple substitution of one word for another. The Hebrew text continues by identifying these beings as Gibborim, the mighty men of ancient times, the warriors of renown. In the Septuagint, the word Gigantes appears again in the latter part of the same verse. The NETS conveys the full meaning. Those were the giants that were of old the renowned humans, meaning they were the giants of ancient times, the renowned human beings. This strategy proves that the translator of Genesis used Gigantes to cover both the mysterious name Nephilim and the Hebrew phrase describing the mighty men of antiquity. This choice transforms the Greek sentence into a direct blow. To a Jewish reader familiar with Hebrew, Nephilim remained a code requiring interpretation. But to a Greek mind, the word Gigantes immediately ignited images of terrifying beings that surpassed human-sized strength and origin. The translation lifted the Nephilim out of the Hebrew record and threw them directly into a category already stored within Greek cultural memory. Scholars who study the Septuagint describe choices such as this as active interpretation. The Greek Genesis remains close to the Hebrew original, yet its translators still adjusted the language to fit the lens of the Greek worldview. The transformation of the Nephilim and the ancient mighty men into Gigantes provides one of the sharpest examples. Numbers preserves the linguistic bridge. That linguistic bridge reappears in Numbers chapter 13. The Hebrew text preserves the testimony of the spies. There we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Enoch who came from the Nephilim. Immediately afterward, they lament their status as grasshoppers. The Septuagint transforms the central sentence into Kai eke heorakamen tos gigantas, meaning, and there we saw the Gigantes. The form gigantas is the inflected form of the noun gigas because it is governed by the verb to see. Genesis uses hoi gigantes, the Gigantes, as the subject. Numbers uses tous gigantas, the Gigantes, as the object of the action. The same Greek noun connects two events separated by many generations. However, the Septuagint version of Numbers removes one crucial detail from the Hebrew text. The Hebrew text clearly states that the sons of Enoch belong to the bloodline of the Nephilim. The Greek text merely reports that the spies saw Gigantes and then moves directly to the degrading image of grasshoppers. The explanatory phrase, the sons of Enoch, came from the Nephilim, completely disappears from the Greek manuscripts. This loss is decisive. The Hebrew text preserves the genealogical claim made by the spies. The Greek text records only a general visual image. The soldiers personally witnessed Gigantes, whose stature crushed their courage. This technique strengthens the linguistic bridge between the Nephilim and the Greek concept of giants while simultaneously cutting the genealogical chain of the Septuagint at this location. We are witnessing the mechanism through which a tradition passes from one language into another. Each text preserves a fragment of information. The Hebrew text retains the name Nephilim and its connection to the Anakim. The Greek text packages those people under the label Gigantes. The key word, Gigantes, also encompasses the Rephaim. The record expands even further when we return to Genesis chapter 14. The Hebrew text records that the alliance of King Chedorlaomer crushed the Rephaim on the battlefield of Ashtaroth Karnaim. In the Septuagint, the Rephaim army at this location is immediately called Gigantes. The NETS translates, "They cut down the giants who were in Ashtaroth Karnaim," meaning they struck down the giants who were at Ashtaroth Karnaim. This transformation proves that the translator of Genesis used Gigantes as an enormous basket. It gathered the Nephilim of Genesis chapter 6. It also gathered the Rephaim of Genesis chapter 14. The same Greek noun now binds two giant races from our map into a single category. The Nephilim dominated the age before the flood. The Rephaim emerged at Ashtaroth Karnaim during the time of Abraham. The translators of Genesis placed both within the Gigantes category so that Greek readers could easily recognize their common pattern. However, the Septuagint collection reflects the individual style of each translator. In the Greek version of Deuteronomy, the name Rephaim retains the transliterated form Rephaim instead of being transformed into Gigantes. This version continues to describe the Anakim as a tall people and refers to the descendants of the giants, clearly demonstrating that vocabulary varies from one book to another. This detail exposes the true nature of the Septuagint. It is a collection of independent translations, displaying a variety of literary styles and lexical strategies. Genesis uses Gigantes broadly. Numbers applies the word directly to the Nephilim. Deuteronomy remains closer to the original sound. Recognizing this forces us to analyze every occurrence within its proper context, rather than arbitrarily constructing a single racial system from every appearance of the word giant. Did ancient Jews view Genesis through the lens of Gigantes? The strategy of the Septuagint strongly influenced how Greek-speaking Jews interpreted Genesis. During the 1st century, the scholar Philo of Alexandria produced an entire treatise titled De Gigantibus on the giants. The entire work directs its attention toward Genesis chapter 6, verses 1 through 4. Philo dissects the story through his distinctive method of philosophical allegory. He transforms the Gigantes into representations of souls addicted to physical desire and bodily pleasure. Philo's interpretation stands in complete contrast to 1st Enoch, where the Watchers and their monstrous offspring appear as beings of flesh and blood. Even so, the title of the work provides powerful historical evidence. A celebrated Jewish scholar living at the center of the Greek world directly applied the label Gigantes to Genesis chapter 6. The interweaving of the Nephilim with the Greek concept of giants had become deeply rooted within ancient Jewish thought. It appeared in the Septuagint and continued to dominate the way Philo read Genesis. This is the true power of the linguistic bridge. It lifts our investigation out of the swamp of modern speculation. Ancient Jews deliberately seized the word Gigantes to describe the Nephilim to the Greek world. They judged the similarities in stature, strength, and supernatural origin sufficient to place them within the same linguistic category. The value of this body of evidence stops firmly at that point. It confirms agreement in translation and perception. Biological nature, genealogy, and genetics belong to an entirely different battlefield, clearly separating two worlds, Gigantes in the Greek Bible and in mythology. At this moment, we must place one word within two separate arenas. In the Septuagint, Gigantes is a tool used by Jewish translators to carry giant figures from the Hebrew record into the Greek language. In Greek mythology, Gigantes refers to a specific race of monsters. Hesiod recounts the moment when Cronus castrated Uranus, and the blood of the sky fell directly upon Gaia Mother Earth. That event gave birth to the Erinyes, the Melii nymphs, and a host of weapon-bearing Gigantes. Later tradition ignited the Gigantomachy, the bloody battle to the death between the army of the Gigantes and the rulers of Olympus. Those Gigantes belonged to a purely Greek mythological genealogy. They possessed their own origins, physical forms, and battlefield. When Jewish translators borrowed the word Gigantes, Greek listeners would certainly have felt the echo of that terrifying war. Both records concerned beings that shattered the biological boundaries of humanity and possessed supernatural origins. However, the Septuagint was still translating a Hebrew text. It never transformed Gaia into the mother of the Nephilim, nor did it insert the Gigantomachy into Genesis. The word Gigantes functioned as a vehicle for transporting a concept, helping the Greek mind recognize the category of monster being discussed. It preserved the separation between the two cultures standing on opposite shores of the sea. The Cyclopes are an independent race. This is the decisive blow concerning the identity of Polyphemus. Today, careless audiences often throw every Greek monster into a single category: giants. This linguistic habit creates the illusion that the Gigantes, the Titans, the Cyclopes, and the hundred-handed monsters all share one bloodline. Ancient Greek texts operated according to a far stricter structural system. Hesiod draws an absolute boundary between the Cyclopes and the Gigantes. The three original Cyclopes were named Brontes, Steropes, and Arges. They were the biological children of Gaia and Uranus, possessed a single eye in the center of the forehead, and carried divine metalworking skills. They were the beings who forged the thunderbolts of Zeus. By contrast, the Gigantes emerged from an entirely different genealogy, springing from the drops of Uranus's blood that fell upon the earth of Gaia. Both races were connected with earth and sky, yet they maintained completely independent names, functions, and generations. Polyphemus in the Odyssey belongs to another branch of the Cyclopes. He lived in isolation inside a rocky cave, tended his flock of sheep, and belonged to a community of wild Cyclopes existing beyond the boundaries of civilized city-states. Homer identifies him as the son of the sea god Poseidon and the goddess Thoosa. Therefore, Polyphemus is entirely separate from the Gigantes, born from the blood of Uranus. He is also distinct from the three Cyclopean smiths described by Hesiod. He belongs to Homer's Cyclopean ecosystem, a race of enormous monsters occupying an isolated island and living in separate savage family groups. This distinction protects the entire investigation from a fatal error. The Septuagint calls the Nephilim Gigantes. Homer calls Polyphemus a Cyclops. The two nouns belong to the same Greek linguistic ecosystem, yet they identify two different categories. The linguistic bridge has successfully carried the Nephilim into the Greek library of giant beings. Completing the remaining section of the bridge to Polyphemus requires a practical examination based upon the behavior origin and physical portrait created by Homer. That is precisely the next step. A shared noun reveals only how cultures label a creature. It is completely incapable of defining the creature's true nature. Attempting to build a complete biological profile from a name alone would be intellectual suicide. We must dissect the bloodline. We must measure the physical form. We must decode the behavior. And we must analyze how these beings confronted humanity and violated the divine order. When every piece of evidence is exposed upon the examination table, Polyphemus emerges as a mystery carrying far greater destructive power than the hollow label Gigantes. But before entering his blood-stained cave, we must isolate the three branches of Cyclopes that have been mixed together for thousands of years. The Cyclopes of Hesiod, the legendary city-building giants, and the Cyclopes encountered by Odysseus at sea possess completely different biological records. Polyphemus belongs to only one of those groups. Throwing every Greek monster into a single category would derail the entire investigation before it even leaves the starting line. The final dossier, an analysis of Polyphemus and the hypothesis that the Nephilim reappeared after the Great Flood. When the name Nephilim was translated into Greek, it was commonly rendered as Gigantes, but Polyphemus carries a different name. Homer calls him One-Eyed Cyclops. This difference requires us to pause before moving forward. In ancient Greek stories, the word Cyclopes was applied to more than one group. It was used for several kinds of figures with very different origins and functions. As these stories became intertwined over time, a blacksmith serving Zeus, a group of city builders, and a man-eating creature could easily be mistaken for members of the same race. For the purpose of this investigation, the ancient sources allow us to divide the Cyclopes dossier into three principal traditions. This is a modern system of classification based upon the function and story of each group, rather than a unified genealogy left behind by the ancient Greeks. The first branch belongs to the divine universe of Hesiod. The second appears in the traditions created to explain the enormous stone walls at Mycenae and Tiryns. The final branch inhabits the world of Homer, where Odysseus enters the Cave of Polyphemus and confronts a creature that feeds upon human beings. Only the third branch provides enough evidence to be placed beside the Nephilim dossier. To understand why, we must begin with the oldest generation of Cyclopes, the first branch. The three primordial Cyclopes of Hesiod. Around the 8th or 7th century before Christ, the poet Hesiod recorded an extensive genealogy of the gods in his work, Theogony. In the section describing the children of Gaia, Earth, and Uranus, Sky, Hesiod introduces three Cyclopes named Bronte, Steropes, and Arges. Their names are directly associated with the phenomena of storms. Bronte evokes the sound of thunder. Steropes is associated with lightning. Arges carries the meaning of brightness or blazing radiance. Hesiod describes them as resembling the gods in many respects, yet each one possessed only a single round eye in the center of his forehead. This feature produced the name Cyclopes, commonly interpreted as meaning round-eyed or circle-eyed. They possessed immense strength, fierce wills, and extraordinary powers of craftsmanship. These three brothers played a central role in the struggle for power between the generations of the gods. Uranus imprisoned them inside the earth. Cronus continued to confine them in Tartarus after overthrowing his father. When the war against the Titans began, Zeus released the Cyclops and received from them the decisive weapons of victory, thunder, lightning, and the thunderbolt. In the version preserved by Apollodorus, the Cyclopes also gave Poseidon his trident and granted Hades the helmet of invisibility. These treasures enabled the three brothers, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades, to defeat the generation of Titans and divides among themselves the rule of the sky, the sea, and the world of the dead. Hesiod therefore places the three primordial Cyclopes in the position of divine craftsmen. They operate among the forces that shape the cosmos, participate in the war that established the order of Zeus, and use their skills to manufacture weapons for the gods. Their dossier belongs to divine genealogy and cosmic conflict far removed from the daily life of mortal communities. The image of the Cyclops forging thunderbolts amid volcanic fire became increasingly vivid in later tradition. In the Aeneid, the Roman poet Virgil describes Bronte, Steropes, and Pericmon working inside the forge of the god Vulcan. They strike metal with their hammers and combine fire clouds, rain, and even sound to produce a thunderbolt for Jupiter. This later Greco-Roman description firmly connected the Cyclops with fiery caves and volcanoes, the image that frequently appears in later Western art. When the accounts are separated by period, the development of the story becomes relatively clear. Hesiod describes three sons of Gaia and Uranus, who were given the task of creating thunder and lightning for Zeus. Many centuries later, Virgil expands that image into the blazing workshop of the god Vulcan. These two accounts do not contradict one another, but they come from two different periods and two different authors. The important point is that regardless of how the image changed, this group of Cyclops had little connection with Polyphemus. Brontes, Sterapes, and Arges belong to the primordial generation of divine beings. They participated in establishing the authority of Zeus-possessed advanced craftsmanship and created weapons requiring exceptional intelligence and technical ability. Hesiod never describes them as tending sheep living in separate family caves or devouring sailors. Their entire identity is centered upon the power of creation and craftsmanship. Polyphemus represents a completely different form of existence. He produces cheese cares for livestock and uses physical strength to kill human beings upon the stone floor of his cave. The single eye, therefore, creates one point of physical similarity, while origin, function, and behavior place them within two separate dossiers. From the Forge of the Gods, the investigation now descends into the Greek region of Argolis, where another group of Cyclopes was remembered through walls so enormous that later generations believe human hands could scarcely have raised them. The second branch, the Cyclopes who built the cities of Tyrans and Mycenae. Imagine an ancient Greek approaching the foot of the fortress at Tiryns. Before him stand massive walls constructed from rough blocks of stone. Every stone is far larger than the materials ordinarily used in houses or temples. The observer possesses no lifting machinery engineering records or archaeological understanding of the Bronze Age. For him, the most natural explanation lies in a name already deeply familiar, the Cyclopes. During the 2nd century after Christ, the geographer Pausanias visited Tiryns and personally observed the surviving city walls. He wrote that the Cyclopes had built them from uncut stones, so enormous that even a pair of mules could barely move the smallest block from its position. Smaller stones had been inserted into the gaps to hold the entire structure tightly together. At Mycenae, Pausanias also described the city walls and the Lion Gate. Local tradition likewise regarded them as works of the Cyclopes, the same builders who had constructed Tiryns for King Brutus. Strabo preserves a more detailed version of the tradition. According to the account he recorded, Brutus invited 7 Cyclopes from Lycia to build the walls of Tiryns. They bore the nickname belly hands because the skill of their hands was the means through which they earned their living. This description transforms the Cyclopes into a group of professional builders who arrived from across the Aegean Sea, rather than the 3 primordial craftsmen born from Gaia and Uranus. Apollodorus also preserves the tradition that Brutus received Tiryns after his dispute with Acrisius, and then asked the Cyclops to fortify the city for him. These texts agree upon one central point. The city-building Cyclopes were associated with stoneworking royal power and defensive structures within the region of Argolis. Modern archaeology places these walls within the Mycenaean Age. Mycenae and Tiryns were 2 major centers of late Bronze Age Greece, flourishing during the 2nd millennium before Christ. The Mycenaeans constructed the walls at these sites by fitting together enormous blocks of limestone. Because of their extraordinary size, later Greeks called this style of construction Cyclopean, meaning that the work appeared so massive that only giant beings such as the Cyclopes could have accomplished it. This distinction helps us separate 2 perspectives: archaeological science and ancient tradition. The walls of Mycenae and Tiryns are genuine remains from the Bronze Age. Pausanias and Strabo recorded that ancient Greeks believed the Cyclopes had constructed them. Modern archaeology, however, reveals them as products of an organized Mycenaean society possessing rulers, craftsmen, laborers, and an administrative system powerful enough to mobilize resources on such a scale. The name Cyclopean therefore preserves the astonishment of later generations when confronted by prehistoric construction techniques. It functions as a cultural memory of structures that exceeded what those later observers believed their ancestors could have built. This group of builders also remains far removed from Polyphemus. The city-building tradition emphasizes labor stoneworking techniques and service to kings such as Brutus. Ancient sources focus upon their hands, strength, and architectural achievements, while the image of a single eye plays a far less prominent role than it does with the three Cyclopes of Hesiod. Polyphemus lives outside the structure of urban civilization. He builds no city walls for a king, works with no team of craftsmen, and creates no structure intended to serve a community. His cave protects only his sheep, his milk, and the private authority of a being who rules his household through physical power. This opposition involves more than geographical location. It reflects the way the two traditions define humanity itself. The Cyclops of Tiryns appear as traces of collective labor. Stones are fitted together, walls are raised, and power is understood through the ability to construct something greater than the individual. The Cyclopes of Homer, by contrast, are removed from the logic of fortification from the beginning. They stand outside urban structure and participate in none of the forms of political community familiar to the Greeks. Polyphemus is therefore more than simply another version of a Cyclops. He represents an entirely different way of describing existence at the margins of social order. Once these two layers of tradition are separated, what remains is not a unified image of one-eyed giants, but two opposing models of life collective labor, creating fortified cities on one side and self-governing existence within caves on the other, where the laws of the city-state possess no authority. Only within this second model does Homer place Polyphemus at the center of the narrative as a being living entirely apart from a world of laws, cities, and political communities as the ancient Greeks understood them. Tamed the third branch, the shepherd Cyclopes in the Odyssey. After departing from the land of the Lotus Eaters, Odysseus and his fleet continue across unfamiliar seas. Homer brings them to the territory of the Cyclopes, a community described with words conveying arrogance, aggression, and life beyond any shared system of law. These Cyclops depend upon the natural fertility of the land. Wheat, barley, and grapes grow under the reign of Zeus, while the inhabitants spend most of their time tending flocks of sheep and goats. They live in caves upon the slopes of high mountains. Each man holds authority over his own wife and children, and pays little attention to the households around him. Homer emphasizes that this community possesses neither a common assembly nor a recognized system of laws. For an ancient Greek audience, this social structure carried a clear meaning. Life in the city-state depended upon the public square council's laws exchange and obligations shared among citizens. Homer's Cyclops represent the opposite model. Each household operates as a separate world. The strongest figure within the cave holds absolute authority, and the wider community possesses no shared mechanism for resolving conflict. They still possess practical skills. Polyphemus knows how to separate his animals, milk them, curdle the milk into cheese, and arrange his work according to the rhythm of the flocks entering and leaving the cave. His dwelling contains separate pens for lambs and young goats, along with vessels filled with milk. These details make him frightening in a very specific way. Odysseus enters the home of a being who understands labor, manages property, and speaks human language. Yet all these abilities serve his enclosed way of life, where hospitality, mercy, and responsibility toward outsiders hold no place. Homer also leaves behind one point that must be read carefully. Polyphemus clearly possesses one eye. Odysseus's entire plan centers upon heating an olive wood stake and driving it into that eye. Ancient lexical sources also identify Polyphemus as a one-eyed Cyclops. However, the Odyssey focuses this physical feature upon Polyphemus and offers little description of the bodies of the other Cyclops. The image of the entire Cyclopean community possessing one eye therefore became far more explicit through later artistic and literary traditions. Their geographical location underwent a similar development. Homer carries Odysseus to the land of the Cyclopes after a sea journey and describes a nearby island populated by many goats. The epic leaves the exact geographical location open. Later, Greek and Roman authors placed Polyphemus in Sicily, often near Mount Etna. Euripides stages his play. Cyclops, before the Cave of Polyphemus in Sicily, while later traditions continued to connect him with the volcanic landscape of the island. Separating these layers allows us to tell the story according to what each source actually provides. Homer gives us the land of the Cyclopes, the cave, the flock of sheep, and the confrontation with Odysseus. Later tradition connects that land with Sicily and Mount Etna. When these layers remain in their proper positions, the story retains its power without transforming a later geographical assumption into a fact directly confirmed by Homer. To which branch does Polyphemus belong? Polyphemus belongs entirely to Homer's branch of shepherd Cyclopes. As early as Book 1 of the Odyssey, the goddess Athena refers to him as a mighty Cyclops, the son of Poseidon, and the sea goddess Thoosa, the daughter of Phorcys. This lineage places him within the supernatural world of Greek mythology, while separating him from the three primordial sons of Gaia and Uranus. He also holds a distinct position within the Cyclopean community. Ancient sources describe Polyphemus as a prominent or exceptionally powerful figure among them. Poseidon shows particular concern for him, and the curse uttered by his blinded son becomes the reason Odysseus's return to Ithaca is prolonged for many years. The Dossier of Polyphemus brings together 4 characteristics with direct value for the Nephilim investigation. His bloodline joins a sea god with a goddess from the family of Phorcys. His enormous body gives him enough strength to move the boulder sealing the entrance of his cave, use a massive tree trunk as a staff, and hurl rocks toward the escaping ship. His way of life stands outside the law of hospitality that the Greeks regarded as sacred under the protection of Zeus. The climax occurs when he seizes the men of Odysseus, smashes them against the ground, and devours them before the eyes of the survivors. These elements provide a legitimate reason to place Polyphemus beside the Nephilim dossier. The comparison rests upon a chain of characteristics directly present within the texts, rather than upon the word giant used in modern translations. The scope of the investigation, therefore, remains clearly defined. The 3 Cyclops of Hesiod belong to a generation of divine craftsmen associated with the authority of Zeus. The city-building Cyclopes belong to traditions explaining the enormous stonework at Mycenae and Tiryns. Polyphemus belongs to Homer's community of shepherds, where each family lives within a cave and the household leader governs by his own authority. Only this 3rd branch intersects with the Nephilim through supernatural ancestry, superhuman strength, violent existence, and the consumption of human flesh. This limited scope also preserves the distinction between Cyclops and Gigantes. The Septuagint uses Gigantes to communicate the Nephilim to Greek-speaking readers. Homer uses Cyclops to identify Polyphemus. The linguistic bridge demonstrates that both traditions exist within the ancient world's imaginative landscape of giant beings. The behavioral dossier will determine how closely the two may be compared. The phrase, "the reappearance of the Nephilim," therefore functions within this investigation as a hypothesis concerning the reappearance of the same biological pattern, supernatural ancestry. A gigantic body, violent power, and a hunger directed toward humanity. First, Enoch. Chapter 15 preserves a separate record concerning the evil spirits that emerged from the bodies of the Nephilim. Homer presents a different record concerning the flesh and blood Polyphemus. Placing these 2 dossiers beside one another creates a legitimate research question, while the answer must remain anchored in the details each text actually provides. The 3 layers of Cyclopean tradition have now been separated. Hesiod's 3 brothers return to the forge of the gods. The city builders remain beside the walls of Mycenae and Tiryns. Only Polyphemus continues standing at the entrance of his cave, one hand gripping the enormous boulder while behind him his sheep and baskets of cheese are arranged against the stone walls. Odysseus still has no idea that the creature he is about to encounter carries the bloodline of Poseidon. Nor does he understand that the sacred law of hospitality will lose all authority the moment the owner of the cave returns. When the boulder seals the entrance, the investigation into Polyphemus moves from genealogy to the scene of the crime. And it is inside that stone cave that the most terrifying similarities with the Nephilim begin to appear. The hunger of first Enoch reappears in the Cave of Polyphemus. The enormous boulder had completely sealed the entrance of the cave. From that moment forward, the investigation left behind the genealogy of the Cyclopes and moved directly into the behavior of Polyphemus. Odysseus and 12 men had left the ship to explore the unfamiliar land. Before setting out, he carried with him a leather wineskin containing a powerful wine that he had received from Meron, the priest of Apollo, in the city of Ismarus. Odysseus preserved that wine as a precious gift, completely unaware that it was about to become the only weapon capable of weakening the master of the stone cave. When the men arrived, Polyphemus had taken his animals outside to graze. The entrance of the cave stood wide open. Inside was a space arranged with considerable care. Woven baskets were filled with cheese. Separate pens held lambs and young goats according to their ages. Vessels of milk stood beside one another, some reserved for drinking, and the rest prepared for curdling. The scene created the impression of a shepherd's household, rather than the dwelling of a monster. Polyphemus understood animal husbandry, milking, cheese-making, and the management of his flock according to a stable schedule. He possessed abundant food, fertile land, and a body powerful enough to defend all his property by himself. That very normality made what was about to happen even more terrifying. The men traveling with Odysseus wanted to take the cheese open, the pens lead the sheep and goats down to the ship, and immediately leave the land. That plan might have allowed everyone to survive. Odysseus chose to remain. He wanted to see the owner of the cave and wait to receive the gift customarily given to a guest. In the world of Homer, this was a natural expectation. A stranger entering a home was ordinarily welcomed by the host. Given food, asked his identity, and presented with a gift before departing. Odysseus entered the cave, believing that a sacred rule would protect him. Polyphemus returned after nightfall. He drove the female sheep and goats into the cave while leaving the males outside in the courtyard. He then lifted a massive boulder and placed it across the entrance. Homer describes the stone as so heavy that 22 four-wheeled wagons could scarcely have lifted it from the ground. This is the first detail establishing that the physical strength of Polyphemus far exceeded that of any human being. Once the exit had been sealed, he began his ordinary work. Polyphemus sat down, milked each sheep and goat, placed the young beneath their mothers, and curdled part of the milk. Every action followed a familiar order. He completed his work before turning to examine the guests standing inside his cave. Polyphemus asked who they were, where they had come from, and what occupation they followed. Odysseus answered that they were Achaean warriors returning from the war at Troy. Storms had driven their ship away from its course and carried them to this land. He presented himself and his companions as suppliants seeking protection. Odysseus then invoked the authority of Zeus. In Greek society during the age of Homer, the reception of strangers was commonly expressed through the concept of xenia, or this relationship included food, shelter, gifts, and protection for the guest. Zeus served as the divine protector of suppliants and strangers. By invoking the name of Zeus, Odysseus was demanding that Polyphemus obey a sacred obligation rather than merely asking for compassion. Polyphemus answered with contempt. He declared that the Cyclopes were stronger than Zeus and the other gods, and that they acted only according to their own will. He possessed absolute power inside the cave, controlling the food, the animals, and the boulder sealing the entrance. From his perspective, personal strength had replaced every law that existed beyond his domain. This response matched Homer's introduction to the Cyclopean people as a whole. They lived inside caves upon mountain peaks, possessed no common assembly, and followed no established system of law. Each man ruled his own wife and children while showing little concern for the families living around him. Polyphemus transformed that social structure into a specific act. He asked where the ship was located. Odysseus recognized the danger and lied that Poseidon had shattered it against the rocks. This answer concealed the remaining men waiting beside the shore, but it also confirmed that those trapped inside the cave possessed little chance of receiving help. Polyphemus advanced toward them. He extended his two enormous hands, seized two men, and smashed them against the stone floor. Homer compares the scene to a man killing young puppies. The heads of the two sailors broke open, and blood spread across the ground. Polyphemus then tore their bodies into pieces and began to eat. He swallowed their flesh, internal organs, and the marrow within their bones. Homer compares him to a great mountain lion that devours its prey and leaves almost nothing behind. When his enormous stomach had been filled with human flesh, he drank pure milk and lay down to sleep among the sheep. This scene created a complete reversal of the law of hospitality. The house that should have protected strangers became a trap. The meal that a host should have offered to his guests transformed the guests themselves into food. The parting gift was replaced by the threat of death. Zeus, the divine protector of strangers, was openly rejected by the master of the cave immediately before the suppliants were murdered. For an ancient Greek audience, the crime of Polyphemus therefore extended beyond cannibalism. He shattered the entire sacred relationship between the host, the stranger, and the gods who watched over them both. Odysseus stood inside the cave and watched two of his men being eaten before his eyes. He considered drawing his sword, approaching Polyphemus, and driving the blade directly into the region of his liver. At that moment, however, he looked toward the boulder sealing the entrance. The death of the cave's owner would turn them all into permanent prisoners. The strength of the 11 surviving men could never move that stone. Odysseus therefore kept his sword inside its sheath and waited for morning. The first night passed among blood, bones, and the breathing of Polyphemus. When dawn arrived, the Cyclops awakened and immediately returned to his ordinary work. He kindled the fire, milked the animals, placed their young beneath him, and arranged the flock. The rhythm of shepherd life continued as though the murders of the previous evening had been nothing more than an ordinary meal. After finishing his work, Polyphemus seized 2 more sailors and ate them for breakfast. He then drove the animals outside, rolled the boulder back across the cave entrance, and left the survivors imprisoned inside. This repetition reveals that cannibalism had become part of the way Polyphemus exercised power. He possessed sheep, goats, milk, and cheese in great abundance. His physical hunger could easily have been satisfied by his animals. Polyphemus still chose human beings. That choice brings the story close to the pattern described in 1 Enoch chapter 7. In 1 Enoch, the giants appeared after the union between the Watchers and human women. The text begins their chain of destruction with a food crisis. The giants consumed everything that human beings produced. When the communities could no longer continue supplying them with food, the giants turned upon humanity itself and began to devour human beings. Their hunger then spread to birds, wild animals, reptiles, and fish. They also consumed one another and drank blood. All life upon the earth was drawn into a cycle of uncontrolled consumption. First, Enoch describes hunger as a force that continually expands. The food produced by humanity is consumed first. The human body becomes the next source of food. The animals are then attacked. Finally, the giants turn upon their own kind. This sequence of behavior reveals a nature that continually demands more than the world can provide. Their enormous bodies create limitless need, while their power transforms every living creature into a source of food. Polyphemus operates within a much smaller setting. He lives inside a stone cave, possesses a flock of animals, and kills 6 members of Odysseus's company. Homer tells the story of one individual during a single adventure, while 1 Enoch describes an entire race pushing the world toward the edge of destruction. Even so, the intersection of behavior becomes very clear. Both records place a gigantic being before human beings who are physically weaker. Available food continues to exist all around them. Superior strength transforms human beings into prey. Cannibalism appears as the highest expression of a life that places desire above every moral boundary. In 1st Enoch, the giants destroy the order of creation by consuming human beings and every other living creature. In the Odyssey, Polyphemus destroys the order of Xenia by eating the people who entered his home as suppliants seeking protection. The two texts use two different moral systems. Enoch views the event through the order of God, where the forbidden union between the Watchers and women produces a race that spreads violence across the earth. Homer places the story within the Greek order, where Zeus protects strangers and every host carries a sacred obligation toward the person who crosses his threshold. The common point lies in the act of crossing a boundary. The Nephilim exceed the limits of humanity through their strength, hunger, and hybrid origin between heaven and earth. Polyphemus moves beyond social order when he transforms physical power into the only laws governing his cave. Both stories place cannibalism at the point where corruption has reached its highest extreme. Then Odysseus transforms food into a weapon. After Polyphemus drove the animals outside, Odysseus began preparing his plan. Inside the cave stood a large olive tree trunk that Polyphemus intended to use as a staff after it had dried. Odysseus estimated that it was nearly the size of the mast of a great ship. He cut off a long section and gave it to his companions, who sharpened one end and hardened it in the fire. The men then concealed the stake beneath a thick layer of dung inside the cave. Odysseus understood that 5 men would be required to operate this weapon. He instructed the survivors to draw lots and choose 4 men to carry out the attack with him. That evening, Polyphemus returned with his entire flock. This time he brought even the male animals deep inside the cave. Homer suggests that an intuition or divine influence caused him to change his usual routine. The boulder once again sealed the entrance. Polyphemus milked the animals, tended the young, and then ate 2 more men. A total of 6 of the 12 sailors who had accompanied Odysseus had now become his food. At that moment, Odysseus brought him the wine. He offered Polyphemus a full bowl and said that the wine was fitting for the meal of human flesh he had just consumed. The sweetness and strength of the wine immediately attracted the Cyclops. Polyphemus emptied the bowl and asked for more. Odysseus poured 3 times. The powerful wine quickly weakened his judgment. When the mind of Polyphemus had begun to spin, Odysseus introduced the most important part of his plan. The Cyclops asked the name of his guest. Odysseus answered, "My name is Nobody." Polyphemus believed him and announced the guest gift he would give to the man named Nobody. He would eat Odysseus last after devouring all the others. This promise completed the reversal of Xenia. Polyphemus truly offered a gift to his guest, but the gift consisted only of his place within the order of consumption. The wine continued to take effect. Polyphemus fell backward onto the ground. Wine and pieces of human flesh poured from his throat as he sank into sleep. Odysseus removed the olive wood stake from the hot ashes. The 4 chosen men raised it with him and drove the sharpened point directly into the single eye of Polyphemus. Odysseus used the full weight of his body to twist the stake like a shipbuilder drilling into timber. Blood flowed around the burning wood. The fire scorched the eyelids and eyebrows. Homer compares the sound to heated metal being plunged by a blacksmith into cold water. The scream of Polyphemus caused the entire cave to tremble. He pulled the stake from his eye and called to the Cyclopes, living upon the surrounding mountain slopes. They gathered outside and asked who was harming him. Polyphemus answered that nobody here was killing him through deception. His neighbors understood those words to mean that no one was attacking him. They advised him to pray to Poseidon and then return to their own caves. Odysseus had used language to defeat physical strength. A creature powerful enough to move a boulder that many wagons could never lift was isolated by his own answer. After the other Cyclops departed, Polyphemus rolled the boulder aside and sat directly at the entrance of the cave. He extended both arms ready to seize anyone who attempted to escape. Odysseus moved to the next stage of his plan. He tied the male sheep together in groups of 3. Each sailor clung beneath the belly of the middle animal, while the sheep on either side concealed the man's body. Odysseus selected the largest ram and held himself beneath its thick wool. When dawn arrived, the flock began to leave the cave. Polyphemus ran his hands across the back of every animal. He searched for men upon their backs, while the sailors hung tightly beneath their bellies. The great ram carrying Odysseus walked out last. Polyphemus placed his hand upon its back and spoke to the animal. He noticed that the leader of the flock was leaving the cave more slowly than usual. In his mind, the ram was grieving over the loss of its master's eye. This moment reveals that Polyphemus still possessed the ability to form an emotional bond with his animals. He understood the habits of each sheep, recognized a change in the way one of them moved, and showed tenderness toward the leader of the flock. That selective tenderness makes his cannibalism even clearer. Polyphemus cared for the animals that belonged to him, while placing foreign human beings in the category of food. When the ram passed through the entrance, Odysseus and the survivors released themselves, drove the animals toward the ship, and rowed out to sea. They had escaped from the cave, but the confrontation continued. Numstasson, the final boulder, and the curse of Poseidon. When the ship had reached a distance from which voices could still be heard, Odysseus turned back and mocked Polyphemus. He declared that the Cyclops had received punishment for devouring guests inside his own home. Those words struck directly at the pride of Polyphemus. He tore a massive piece of rock from the mountainside and hurled it toward the sound. The boulder fell in front of the ship, creating a surge of water that drove the vessel back toward the shore. The sailors begged Odysseus to remain silent. Odysseus continued and revealed his true name. He declared that the man who had blinded Polyphemus was Odysseus, the son of Laertes, and the ruler of Ithaca. The declaration of his name brought glory to the hero, but it also gave Polyphemus the information he needed to demand revenge. The Cyclops raised his face toward heaven and called upon Poseidon. He confirmed that Poseidon was his father, and prayed that the sea god would prevent Odysseus from returning home. If fate still allowed the hero to reach Ithaca, Polyphemus asked that the journey be prolonged, that all his companions die, that Odysseus return aboard another man's ship, and that he encounter disaster within his own home. Poseidon heard the prayer. The curse of Polyphemus became the driving force behind many of the disasters that followed in the Odyssey. As early as Book 1, Homer identifies Polyphemus as the son of Poseidon and the sea goddess Thoosa, the daughter of Phorcys. He also calls him the strongest among the Cyclopes. This bloodline creates another point of intersection with the NEPHILIM Dossier. Polyphemus was born from two figures belonging to the supernatural world of Greek mythology. The Nephilim and first Enoch were born from watchers belonging to the heavenly realm and human women. Both patterns place a supernatural origin behind a gigantic body, yet their genealogical structures belong to two separate systems. Thoosa was a sea goddess rather than a mortal woman. Poseidon was a god of Greek mythology rather than a watcher in a Jewish text. Homer also places Polyphemus within the world of the Olympian gods, where Zeus, Athena, and Poseidon participate directly in the destiny of Odysseus. Preserving these differences makes the behavioral similarities more credible. Tars, in what sense does the hunger reappear? The hunger of first Enoch reappears inside the cave of Polyphemus as a pattern of behavior. A being whose body greatly exceeds the human form possesses almost absolute power over those who are weaker. His origin touches the supernatural world. Shared laws lose all authority within his private domain. Human beings are reduced to food. Violence reaches its highest point through the act of tearing apart and swallowing victims while they still occupy the position of guests. This pattern creates a powerful echo of 1 Enoch chapter 7. However, Homer keeps Polyphemus within the Greek tradition of the Cyclopes. The poem identifies his parents, his dwelling, his animals, his behavior, and his prayer to Poseidon. First, Enoch preserves a separate record concerning the origin of the Nephilim, their destruction of the world before the flood, and the evil spirits that emerged from their bodies after death. The two texts create a similarity in character structure. The claim that a Nephilim spirit directly controlled the body of Polyphemus belongs to the realm of hypothesis. Neither Homer nor 1 Enoch establishes a direct relationship between the two figures. The true value of the comparison lies within a sequence of signs that can be examined directly within the texts. Polyphemus possesses supernatural ancestry within Greek mythology, a body and strength far beyond those of humanity, a life outside shared law, and the practice of consuming human beings who enter his territory. The Nephilim of 1st Enoch possess an origin produced through the union of heaven and earth. Gigantes, a role in driving the world into violence, and a hunger that consumes humanity. The correspondence is strong enough to place the two dossiers beside one another. A claim of direct identity requires genealogical evidence that the surviving ancient sources have yet to provide. Polyphemus now stands before us with his entire dossier exposed. A giant with supernatural ancestry devoured human beings inside his own stone cave and openly placed personal strength above the law of hospitality and the authority of Zeus. The account in 1st Enoch likewise places cannibalism at the moment when the Nephilim transformed their enormous strength into an instrument for destroying humanity. The next stage of comparison will place every characteristic from the two dossiers beside the other, from ancestry, physical form, and power to existence beyond the law, in order to determine precisely how closely Polyphemus resembles the Nephilim, and which differences continue to preserve the two traditions on separate sides. The abnormal sign, the curse of the single eye. Odysseus escaped from the stone cave through intelligence, but his victory focused upon one very specific weakness in the body of Polyphemus, the single eye in the center of his face. Throughout the Odyssey, Homer repeatedly uses the singular form when describing the eye that Odysseus blinded. The entire plan inside the cave depended upon heating the olive wood stake, driving it into that eye, and twisting it violently until blood poured around the burning point. As early as Book 1, Homer also states that Poseidon was enraged with Odysseus because he had blinded the eye of Polyphemus. This characteristic places Polyphemus firmly within the Cyclopean tradition. Hesiod describes the three primordial Cyclopes as possessing one round eye in the center of the forehead, and explains their name through that physical form. They resembled the gods in many other characteristics, yet the single eye became the most prominent identifying mark of the entire group. However, the eye of Polyphemus must be understood on two completely different levels. Within the ancient Greek dossier, it is a physical characteristic of a mythological being. In modern medicine, the term cyclopia refers to an extremely severe congenital abnormality generally found at the most serious end of the holoprosencephaly spectrum, a condition in which the embryonic forebrain fails to divide completely into two hemispheres during the earliest weeks of pregnancy. This condition may produce one central eye, two eyes fused within a single eye socket, the absence of the nose, or a trunk-like projection of tissue located above the eye region. The medical causes are also more complex than a single gene mutation. Cases of holoprosencephaly may be associated with chromosomal abnormalities, such as trisomy 13 variants in genes controlling the development of the midline structures of the brain, and face disruption of sonic hedgehog signaling maternal diabetes, and certain environmental factors acting during the earliest stages of embryonic development. The survival profile of cyclopia is also entirely different from the figure described by Homer. Newborns with cyclopia generally belong to the most severe category of holoprosencephaly, and most survive for only a very short time after birth. Gene reviews from the United States National Institutes of Health records that infants with cyclopia or ethmocephaly usually die within the first week. Polyphemus, by contrast, possesses an adult body, overwhelming strength, coherent speech, the ability to manage livestock and produce cheese, an understanding of family relationships, and the capacity to plan how he will keep prisoners inside his cave. The medical term cyclopia and the Cyclops of epic poetry therefore meet only in the image of a central eye. The clinical diagnosis describes an extremely severe developmental disorder of the brain and face, while Homer constructs a mythological being with fully developed intelligence and the ability to survive. The value of the single eye lies in its literary function as an identifying sign. It marks Polyphemus as belonging to the Cyclopes. It concentrates all of his strength into one vulnerable point. It also allows the story to create a direct contrast between physical power and intelligence. Odysseus possesses the smaller body, but he discovers the only weakness in a creature that is almost impossible to defeat. That eye does not provide a genetic measurement. It leads us toward a more useful conclusion. Polyphemus carries a distinctive physical feature that the NEPHILIM Dossier never describes. This first difference makes the comparison that follows more credible. We retain the characteristics that truly overlap while placing the single eye in its proper position as a Cyclopean sign belonging to the Greek world. Once the single eye has been removed from the genetic argument, we can examine the remaining characteristics of Polyphemus. What draws attention is that the features bringing him closest to the Nephilim appear outside the eye. They appear in his origin, size, strength, hunger, social structure, and the way he exercises power over human beings. Origins belonging to different supernatural traditions. Homer introduces Polyphemus as early as Book 1 as the son of Poseidon and the sea goddess Thoosa, the daughter of Phorcys. His genealogy therefore belongs entirely to the divine world of Greek mythology. Poseidon directly hears the prayer of his blinded son and transforms that anger into an obstacle that follows Odysseus throughout his long journey back to Ithaca. The Nephilim Dossier also begins with a union that crosses the boundary between heaven and earth. Genesis chapter 6 places the Nephilim in the period when the sons of God came to human women and children were born to them. The precise interpretation of the sons of God has produced several schools of thought, but first Enoch adopts a clearly angelic interpretation. Watchers from the heavenly realm take earthly women as wives, and those women give birth to giants. Both dossiers place a supernatural origin behind a gigantic body. The similarity ends at that general pattern. Polyphemus is the son of Poseidon and a sea goddess. Both his father and his mother belong to Greek mythology. The Nephilim and first Enoch are born from watchers and human women, creating a union between heavenly beings and mortal flesh. Poseidon serves as the god of the sea within the Olympian system. Semjaza and the Watchers belong to Jewish angelic tradition. The two systems use their own names, genealogies, and concepts of divine beings. The point of intersection, therefore, lies within the narrative structure. A gigantic being appears through the intervention of the supernatural world in the ordinary order of reproduction. Nash, a body measured by what it can do. Homer provides no exact height for Polyphemus. The poet measures his body through action. Polyphemus lifts the boulder sealing the entrance of the cave, while the entire company of Odysseus is completely powerless before it. His unfinished staff is almost the size of a ship's mast. After he is blinded, he breaks rocks from the mountainside and hurls them toward the ship escaping across the sea. These details construct the image of a body far beyond ordinary human limits, without providing a numerical measurement of height. First, Enoch also presents the giants through their immense size and terrifying capacity for consumption. The translation by R.H. Charles preserves an extraordinarily large measurement of their height in chapter 7, although the manuscript history indicates that this figure must be treated cautiously. Their sequence of actions is more consistent. They consume everything produced by humanity, turn upon human beings themselves, and then attack birds, animals, reptiles, and fish. Numbers adds another perspective to the dossier of the world after the flood. The spies encountered the Anakim in Canaan and report that they felt as small as grasshoppers. Their testimony clearly carries the language of fear, yet it still reveals that Israelite tradition remembered the Anakim as a people whose stature placed enormous psychological pressure upon those who faced them. Polyphemus and the giant peoples of the biblical record therefore meet through a familiar method of description. Their bodies are defined by the imbalance of power. Human beings standing before them feel impossibly small. Ordinary objects become enormous when placed within their hands. Their physical strength allows them to control space resources and the lives of those who are weaker. Hunger transforms human beings into food. The most direct similarity appears in the act of cannibalism. Polyphemus possesses entire flocks of sheep and goats, along with milk and cheese. His stone cave contains enough food to sustain a stable shepherd household. He still chooses the sailors. Homer describes him seizing two men, smashing them upon the stone floor, tearing apart their bodies and eating their flesh, internal organs, and bone marrow. The act continues the following morning and the next evening, bringing the total number of men consumed to 6. First Enoch chapter 7 presents an almost parallel sequence of behavior on a much larger scale. The giants consume everything produced by human beings. When humanity loses the ability to continue feeding them, they turn upon human beings themselves. Their hunger then spreads toward the animals and concludes with the giants devouring one another and drinking blood. The two stories differ in scale. Polyphemus kills sailors trapped within a cave. The Nephilim in First Enoch drive the entire world before the flood into a crisis of survival. Yet both stories describe the moment when a gigantic being transforms physical power into the right to seize and consume the bodies of others. Within the Enochic tradition, this behavior marks the destruction of the created order. In the Odyssey, it reverses the law of hospitality. The person entering a house as a guest becomes the food of the host. The same act of cannibalism therefore carries two different layers of moral meaning, yet both place the giant figure outside the boundaries of the human community. Cyclops' strength becomes the supreme law. Homer introduces the Cyclopes as a community that possesses neither a common council nor a unified system of law. Each man holds authority within his own cave and governs his household by himself. Polyphemus fully expresses this model when he declares that the Cyclopes are stronger than Zeus and acts entirely according to his own will. Within his domain, power originates from the body. The boulder transforms the cave into a prison. His two hands determine who lives and who becomes food. The animals, the milk supply, and the prisoners all remain under the authority of the same master. Polyphemus requires no counsel to judge Odysseus. He requires no law to justify his actions. Strength has become the only answer. Genesis describes the world before the flood through two key terms, corruption and violence. The earth is filled with hamas, a Hebrew word that can mean violence, cruelty, or conduct that destroys the social order. First, Enoch expands this setting through the specific behavior of the Watchers and their children. Knowledge is used to create weapons, violence spreads, and the giants use their size and hunger to seize every form of life around them. Polyphemus does not live in the same age or within the same religious system. He reproduces a similar principle. When power separates itself from law and moral responsibility, the weaker person immediately becomes property or prey. For modern viewers, this point brings the ancient story back into a very familiar experience. You do not need to stand before a giant to recognize this mechanism. Wherever power considers itself higher than the law, the order of Polyphemus begins to form. The boulder before the cave entrance is simply the physical version of a system in which the strong control the exit, possess the resources, and determine the fate of everyone trapped inside. Polyphemus belongs to a community rather than existing as a solitary monster. Polyphemus commonly receives all the attention, but Homer places him among an entire people of Cyclopes. When he screams after being blinded, the Cyclops living in the surrounding caves immediately come running. They understand one another's speech, share the same territory, and recognize Poseidon within their religious world. This makes Polyphemus a member of a community with a shared name. The Bible also presents the tall peoples as communities rather than isolated individuals. The Anakim are associated with Hebron and the hill country of Canaan. Deuteronomy describes the Amim as a numerous, powerful people as tall as the Anakim. and counted among the Rephaim. The Ammonites call a similar community the Zamzummim. Og rules Bashan as a king belonging to the remnant of the Rephaim. This dossier places the tall communities within cities, territories, and national memory. The fifth similarity lies within their group structure. Polyphemus belongs to a people called the Cyclopes. The Anakim, Emim, Zamzummim, and Rephaim appear as communities identified by the surrounding nations through specific names. This allows the investigation to move beyond the image and of one isolated monster. Both textual worlds preserve memories of groups of beings or communities whose stature, power, and way of life clearly differed from those of the human beings surrounding them. However, a more precise evaluation requires us to examine three principal boundaries between the two dossiers. Bashan, the single eye, belongs exclusively to the Cyclopean Dossier. First, Enoch describes the giants through their size, hunger, and violent behavior. Genesis refers to the Nephilim as the mighty men of ancient times. Numbers connects the Anakim with the Nephilim through the report of the spies. This entire chain of texts remains silent concerning a single eye. The physical form of the Cyclops therefore belongs to Greek tradition. It provides the identifying sign for Polyphemus, Brontes, Steropes, and Argus, while the Nephilim dossier uses different characteristics. This distinction possesses great value because a direct blood relationship would ordinarily require stable inherited features. The eye in the center of the forehead appears in no biblical or Enochic description of the Nephilim, Anakim, or Rephaim. The two genealogies operate within two religious systems. Poseidon and Thoasa belong to the world of Greek mythology. Homer identifies Poseidon as the father of Polyphemus, and Thoasa as a sea goddess, the daughter of Phorcys. First, Enoch constructs the Nephilim from the Watchers and human women. The Watchers are angels who cross the boundary established for them. The mothers belong to humanity. The children produced by this union possess gigantic bodies and later leave evil spirits upon the earth after their deaths. Both genealogies contain a supernatural element, yet their internal structures differ completely. Polyphemus is the son of two divine figures within the Greek system. The Nephilim of Enoch carry an origin combining heavenly beings with mortal women. Poseidon therefore retains his identity as a Greek god of the sea, while Semjaza retains his identity as the leader of the Watchers within Jewish tradition. Renaming one figure as the other would erase the evidence rather than explain it. A direct genealogical line has yet to be proven. The surviving texts provide many indirect connections. The Septuagint translates Nephilim with the word Gigantes. The biblical tradition records tall communities appearing after the flood. The Greek world tells stories about Gigantes and Cyclopes with supernatural origins. Homer describes Polyphemus as possessing gigantic strength, living outside the law and consuming human beings. But a direct genealogy requires the names of parents, a sequence of generations, or an explicit statement connecting the bloodlines. Homer traces the genealogy of Polyphemus to Poseidon and Thoasa. The Bible traces the Anakim to Anak, while placing the Emim and Zamzummim within the category of the Rephaim. First, Enoch traces the Nephilim to the Watchers and human women. These three lines continue to run parallel within the surviving texts. No ancient source has yet revealed a migration route from Hermon or Canaan to the land of the Cyclopes. The Mediterranean provides a setting for cultural contact, while the texts preserve a gap concerning any specific movement of the Anakim or Rephaim into the Homeric world. The surviving evidence, therefore, establishes a strong similarity in character patterns. It does not establish direct identity. Conclusion of the comparison. Polyphemus possesses a supernatural genealogy, a body with strength far beyond that of humanity, a way of life outside shared law, and a hunger that transforms strangers into food. The Nephilim in 1st Enoch also emerge from an intersection between heaven and earth, possess gigantic bodies, use their power to spread violence, and turn toward devouring humanity. The biblical traditions concerning the world after the flood continue to preserve the Anakim Emim Zamzumim and Rephaim as communities possessing names, territories, and reputations for extraordinary stature. These lines create a consistent ancient pattern. Beings whose origins extend beyond humanity, whose physical power is overwhelming, whose authority possesses few limits, and whose behavior reduces human beings to prey. The single eye, the Poseidon Thoosa genealogy, and the historical gap continue to hold Polyphemus within to the Greek Dossier of the Cyclopes. The correspondence lies within character structure and cultural memory. Direct genealogical identity still awaits a chain of evidence that the ancient sources have yet to provide. Polyphemus may therefore be read as a Greek echo of the giant pattern that once appeared in Enoch and the Bible. He does not become a Nephilim simply because he possesses an eye in the center of his forehead. His case becomes stronger elsewhere. Supernatural ancestry, a gigantic body rejection of sacred law and hunger directed toward human flesh. This sequence of characteristics keeps the central question of the investigation open. Did Homer create Polyphemus entirely from poetic imagination, or was he preserving a Greek version of an ancient memory concerning giants who once lived upon the earth? 3 explanations for the mystery of Polyphemus. After placing Polyphemus beside the Nephilim dossier, we have seen a chain of similarities clear enough to continue the investigation. He possesses a supernatural origin, a body far beyond the human scale, lives according to his own power, and transforms the guests inside his cave into food. These characteristics recall the image of the giants in 1st Enoch, while bringing us back to the question that opened this entire dossier. Did Polyphemus emerge from Homer's imagination, from a story carried across the sea, or from an ancient memory that existed before either tradition? The following 3 explanations each possess their own foundation. Each one illuminates a part of the mystery, while the complete story continues to preserve a gap that the ancient texts have yet to fill. A story may have emerged from the fears shared by all human beings. The first explanation views Polyphemus as the product of independent imagination. Human beings in many cultures have lived near caves, high mountains, wilderness regions, and unfamiliar communities. Such places easily produce stories about an enormous creature living beyond the order of villages, possessing great strength and regarding travelers as prey. This image touches a very basic human fear. A small group enters the territory of someone stronger. The exit is sealed. Ordinary weapons become useless. Survival depends entirely upon intelligence. This structure has allowed the story of Polyphemus to outlive the age of Homer. In folklore studies, the story of the blinded giant is classified within an international tale type commonly known as a TU 1137, the blinded ogre. Many versions preserved throughout Europe, the Caucasus, Western Asia, and neighboring regions retain familiar elements. A man-eating giant is blinded while sleeping, and the prisoners escape beneath a flock of animals. Scholars debate the relationship between these stories and the Odyssey, because many versions appear to preserve traces of an oral tradition broader than Homer's epic. This reveals that Polyphemus belongs to a narrative pattern with extraordinary endurance. The weak defeat the strong through cunning. Human order regains control from a creature that uses violence as law. The giant's hunger creates the most direct threat because it transforms the human body into a resource controlled by the powerful. According to this explanation, the similarity between Polyphemus and the Nephilim arises because both traditions construct the giant as the embodiment of uncontrolled violence. An excessively large body creates excessive power. Power without limits transforms the weak into prey. Cannibalism removes the character from the moral community and places him in opposition to human order. This explanation carries persuasive force at the psychological level and within the structure of the story. However, the case of Polyphemus contains a highly specific sequence of details: the single eye, the heated stake, the name nobody. the escape beneath the bellies of the sheep, and the boulder hurled after the ship. When multiple stories preserve the same complex sequence of actions, the possibility of cultural transmission begins to carry greater weight than completely independent coincidence. From this point, the investigation returns to the sea. Stories traveled with the ships. The ancient Mediterranean Sea was a network of connections. Ships transported copper from Cyprus, pottery from the Aegean, produce from the Levant, Egyptian goods, and many kinds of valuable materials between ports. These routes carried merchants, sailors, craftsmen, soldiers, and migrants across an enormous region. Archaeology has confirmed regular exchanges between the Aegean world, Cyprus, Egypt, and the Levant during the Late Bronze Age. Mycenaean and Cypriot pottery appears at many sites along the eastern Mediterranean coast, while materials and artistic styles from the east also traveled westward along the same routes. Modern studies describe numerous maritime pathways and intermediary communities that created these connections. A sailor usually carried more than cargo. He carried the names of lands he had visited, memories of distant peoples, stories heard inside taverns, and warnings concerning places beyond the familiar map. Every time a story was retold, the storyteller adjusted it for a new audience. Names changed, the gods changed positions. The setting moved toward a region of the sea that the listeners could imagine. But a sufficiently powerful core usually survived. A community of Cyclopes could have entered Greek poetry through stories that traveled across many ports before reaching the ears of poets. A Levantine tradition concerning giants who lived outside the human order could also have entered the Aegean world, and then been recreated by Homer through the genealogy of Poseidon. The law of hospitality protected by Zeus, and the image of shepherds living inside caves. This possibility corresponds with the way Homeric poetry developed. The Iliad, Sarandan, the Odyssey, belonged to an oral poetic tradition that evolved across many generations. Poets used formulas, motifs, and inherited layers of memory, then adjusted them during each performance. Homeric scholarship also shows that ancient Greek poetry could absorb and transform cultural elements from the Near East, especially during an age when trade and writing increasingly connected the two regions. Within such an environment, a story could change its form while preserving its central skeleton. A Near Eastern giant enters Greek tradition and becomes a Cyclops. A story about violence against the order of God is retold in another culture as an offense against the law of hospitality protected by Zeus. A creature connected with the mainland is moved to a distant island fitting the maritime journey of Odysseus. This explanation creates a reasonable historical bridge between the Levant and the Homeric world. It also corresponds with research that has identified possible connections between the Polyphemus story and Near Eastern traditions. Some scholars have examined one-eyed human figures upon Mesopotamian cylinder seals, along with narrative motifs resembling events in Book 9 of the Odyssey. The results of these studies leave the precise origin of the story open to debate, but they confirm that the search for Eastern connections to Polyphemus possesses a genuine academic foundation. However, the route of transmission has yet to appear in the form of a text connecting every stage. No clay tablet has been found clearly explaining that the Nephilim became the Cyclopes. No record has been discovered of a storyteller carrying the tradition from Canaan into Greece. The current evidence confirms an environment of contact and the ability of ideas to travel. A direct relationship between the individual figures remains within the realm of reconstruction. This brings us to the third explanation, which is also the most compelling for an investigation into ancient memory. Two traditions may preserve the same kind of memory. Mythology often preserves the past in a manner very different from historical chronicles. A historian attempts to preserve names, dates, and locations. An oral story preserves images powerful enough to survive through many generations. Names gradually change dimensions, become exaggerated, and the actions of gods enter the story. Even so, a city, a war, or the memory of an unusual people may continue to survive within that narrative layer. Troy provides a famous example. The archaeological site at Hisarlik preserves approximately 4,000 years of history, including numerous layers of cities built upon one another. Homer transformed Troy into the center of the Iliad, and the memory of that city continued to influence literature and art for more than 2,000 years. Archaeology confirms the existence of a real ancient city at the location associated with Troy, while the individual details of Homer's war remain within the realm of interpretation and debate. This example reveals that an epic can place a mythological story upon a foundation of real geography and historical memory. According to the same principle, stories about giants may preserve memories of communities that made a powerful impression upon surrounding peoples. The Bible preserves the Anakim at Hebron, the Rephaim in Bashan, the Emim in Moab, and the Zamzumim in Ammon. These names are connected with land cities and specific individuals such as Og. Greek tradition preserves the Cyclopes as beings living at the margins of the ordered world. Polyphemus possesses livestock language, a family, and a community of Cyclopes living around him. Both systems tell stories about groups of people or beings possessing unusual stature, superior strength, and a way of life that caused ordinary human beings to feel small. A shared memory of tall communities, terrifying warriors, or groups living outside the urban order could have created the historical ground beneath both traditions. Across generations, that memory was interpreted through the theology of each culture. The Jewish tradition placed the origin of the giants within the story of the Watchers, the Nephilim, and judgment through water. The Greeks placed Polyphemus within the family of Poseidon inside a world where the gods of the sea directly intervened in human destiny. Each culture used its own language to explain a kind of being that existed beyond ordinary human limits. This explanation creates an important balance. Shared memory carries a meaning broader than direct biological ancestry. It includes the way human beings remember events, lands, communities, and threats that deeply affected their ancestors. A story may preserve the core of a memory, while its specific form continues to change with every generation of storytellers. According to this interpretation, Polyphemus becomes the Greek version of an ancient giant pattern. His divine origin reflects a body existing beyond the range of ordinary humanity. His cave and shepherd way of life place him at the edge of civilization. His hunger for human flesh transforms him into a threat to the social order. His single eye seals the Cyclopean identity that the Greeks gave to the character. At the same time, the Hebrew Dossier preserves another pattern of memory. The Watchers cross the boundary between heaven and earth. The Nephilim use their enormous bodies to consume both produce and humanity. The Anakim and Rephaim continue to appear in memories of the world after the flood, as communities possessing territories. The two traditions may therefore reflect a broader shared memory concerning giants who once stood outside the human order. The value of this explanation lies in its ability to connect text, geography, and behavior. Its limitation lies within the distance between cultural memory and biological events. Shared memory demonstrates the similarity of narrative patterns. Direct genealogy still requires names, generational sequences, and specific physical evidence. Which hypothesis fits best? All three explanations may have participated in the formation of the Polyphemus story. Human imagination created the psychological foundation for the struggle between the weak and the strong. The Mediterranean network carried stories, images, and motifs from one culture into another. Ancient memory provided real material that poets and communities transformed into mythology. Polyphemus may therefore contain multiple layers at the same time. He is a character shaped by Homer for the story of Odysseus. He belongs to a folk tale type that circulated widely beyond the Odyssey. He may also preserve echoes from the Near Eastern world where traditions concerning giants had existed from a very early period. The most cautious explanation places considerable weight upon cultural interaction and oral memory. Archaeology confirms that the Aegean world and the Levant were connected through trade travel and the exchange of ideas. Homeric scholarship confirms that Greek epic poetry developed within an oral environment capable of absorbing elements from many sources. Folklore studies confirm that the Polyphemus motif exists more broadly than a single version. These facts create a realistic path through which the story could travel and change. Meanwhile, the hypothesis of a direct NEPHILIM bloodline traveling from Hermon to the Cave of Polyphemus still lacks a genealogical chain and physical evidence. The strongest conclusion, therefore, lies within the pattern of memory. Polyphemus does not appear as a Nephilim who is simply given a new name. He appears as a Greek figure carrying many characteristics once associated with the giant traditions of Enoch in the Bible. This similarity may have arisen through cultural contact from a shared ancient narrative source, or from memories of communities that inspired terror during the prehistoric world and the Bronze Age. What does the bloodline reborn actually mean? We can now return to the title of the investigation, the One-Eyed Cyclops and the NEPHILIM Bloodline Reborn After the Flood. The phrase, the bloodline reborn, carries two possible meanings. In the biological sense, it requires a genealogy connecting the Watchers and the Nephilim before the flood with the Anakim and Rephaim, then continuing onward to Polyphemus. The surviving texts preserve separate sections of the story, while the complete connecting chain remains outside the record. In the sense of cultural memory, the rebirth appears more clearly. The pattern of a giant with supernatural origins continues to return after the Great Flood. It appears in the words, and also afterward in Genesis. It bears the name Anakim at Hebron and Rephaim in Bashan. When it enters the Septuagint, the Nephilim receive the Greek name Gigantes. When it reaches the world of Homer, that pattern appears again through Polyphemus, a gigantic being possessing divine ancestry, living beyond shared law and devouring human beings. The body changes, the name changes, the divine system changes, but the central image preserves the same power, a race extending beyond human limitations, using gigantic bodies to dominate and transform the weak into prey. This is the part of the rebirth that the texts allow us to see most clearly. It is the return of an ancient pattern within the memories of many cultures. It is also a warning about power separated from law, hunger separated from limits, and strength separated from morality. Odysseus defeated Polyphemus because the Cyclops trusted only his body. The Nephilim were judged because their strength transformed the earth into a place filled with violence. Both stories lead the listener toward a lesson extending far beyond the question of giants. Strength creates protection when it serves order and compassion. Strength becomes a disaster when it places itself above every sacred boundary. This is precisely what makes the Dossier of Polyphemus worthy of reflection after nearly 3,000 years. Perhaps Homer told a completely Greek story. Perhaps he inherited a tradition that had traveled through the ports of the Mediterranean. It is also possible that the roar of Polyphemus carried a memory older than Homer himself, a memory of an age when giants were still present within the stories of the ancestors. The map of Enoch has carried us from Hermon to Bashan Hebron, and then outward toward the coast. The linguistic bridge carried the Nephilim into the world of the Gigantes. The Cave of Polyphemus revealed the same hunger, the same uncontrolled strength, and the same attitude of placing oneself above sacred law. The strongest evidence confirms the correspondence of the pattern. The greatest gap remains within the genealogy, and that gap leaves one final question for you. When many ancient cultures remember giants with supernatural origins, are we seeing similar stories created independently, or the final fragments of a memory that humanity once shared? Tachaitan, did Homer create Polyphemus, or did he simply rename an older memory? The ship of Odysseus continued moving out to sea. The oars struck the water in a steady rhythm, carrying the 6 survivors farther away from the island. Behind them, Polyphemus sat among the rocks along the shore, his face covered in blood, while his single eye had descended into eternal darkness. He listened as the sound of the oars gradually faded, then raised his face toward the sky. Two enormous hands reached out above the sea. Polyphemus called Poseidon by a deeply personal title, his father. He begged the sea god to prevent Odysseus from returning home. If fate still carried the hero back to Ithaca, that journey would be prolonged through suffering. All of his companions would die, and Odysseus would return aboard another man's ship, only to confront disaster within his own home. Homer ends the prayer with one brief sentence that carries enormous weight throughout the entire epic. Poseidon heard him. The Cyclops then lifted another massive rock and hurled it after the ship. The stone fell behind the rudder, causing the sea to surge and pushing the vessel toward the island, where the rest of the fleet was waiting. Odysseus and the survivors rode away in sorrow, grateful to have escaped death, but carrying the memory of the 6 men who had been left behind inside the cave. From that moment, Polyphemus disappeared from the horizon of Odysseus. But the story of the Cyclops began another journey. It traveled through the songs of poets, through stories told beside harbor docks, through Greek festivals, and eventually entered the written text of the Odyssey. The image of the one-eyed giant continued to live in drama, sculpture, painting, and Western literature for nearly 3,000 years. That endurance raises a question deeper than the adventure itself. Polyphemus possesses many highly specific details. He lives inside a cave, owns a flock of sheep, produces cheese, understands human speech, and recognizes Poseidon as his father. He also belongs to a community of Cyclopes who share a language, possess separate families, and remember a prophet named Telemus, who once foretold that Odysseus would blind him. The character, therefore, contains an economic life, a social structure, a religious system, and a prophetic memory. Polyphemus appears to carry the shape of a tradition built up across many generations, rather than that of a passing image created merely to provide Odysseus with another enemy. This understanding corresponds with the way modern scholars approach Homer. The Iliad and the Odyssey developed within an oral tradition of poetry composed in hexameter. Stories, verbal formulas, and collective memories pass through many generations of poets before the two epics reach the form preserved today. According to this interpretation, Homer represents the genius who shaped a vast oral inheritance, rather than an author who sat down and invented the entire epic world in a single act of composition. That changes the way we ask the question. Homer certainly gave Polyphemus his complete position within the story of Odysseus. He connected him with Poseidon, placed the confrontation within the system of Xenia, and transformed the Cyclops' curse into the cause behind the disasters that followed. But the central core of the story may be older than the epic itself. A sailor enters the cave of a man-eater. A boulder seals the entrance. Wine causes the giant to lower his guard. A heated steak destroys the single eye. The survivors clinks beneath the bellies of animals to escape the searching hands of the cave's master. This complex sequence of events continues to appear within numerous folk traditions beyond Greece. That places Polyphemus within a much broader current of stories that traveled across languages, borders, and many different ages. Homer, therefore, did what great storytellers often do. He received a motif that had already existed for a very long time, placed it within the Greek world, and gave it a new meaning. In Homer's hands, the story of the blinded giant became a confrontation between intelligence and strength, between the law of hospitality and savage power, and between a man who understood the value of community and a creature who regarded his stone cave as the entire world. The way Homer used older memory becomes even clearer when we return to another place within the epic tradition. That place is Troy. Troy, when poetry preserves a real location. For many centuries, people debated the identity of Homer's Troy. The Iliad describes a wealthy city possessing strong walls, great gates, palaces, and a position overlooking the plain where the Achaean army camped. The city stood near the Hellespont at the intersection between the Aegean world and Anatolia. During the 19th century, Heinrich Schliemann brought the search to the mound of Hisarlik in northwestern Anatolia near the southern entrance of the Dardanelles. He began excavating there in 1870, believing that the layers beneath the earth concealed the city of King Priam. Later excavations revealed that Hisarlik contained a sequence of settlements extending across thousands of years. It had never been only one city. Communities repeatedly built, destroyed, expanded, and then constructed new cities upon the foundations of older structures. Walls, houses, gates, ramps, and fortresses from many different ages accumulated upon one another, creating a complex archaeological mound. UNESCO identifies Troy as a site preserving approximately 4,000 years of history and holding an important position within the relationship between Anatolia and the Mediterranean world. Many of the most prominent surviving defensive remains belong to Troy II and Troy VI, while a lower city covering approximately 30 hectares existed to the south of the citadel during the Late Bronze Age. After Schliemann, Wilhelm Dorpfeld continued studying the site. During the 1930s, Carl Blegen and the archaeological expedition from the University of Cincinnati conducted more systematic excavations. Blegen's team distinguished approximately 46 stratigraphic layers and organized them into 9 major phases of the city. This work enabled archaeologists to follow the development of Troy from the early Bronze Age to the end of the Mycenaean world. 2 layers received particular attention: Troy VI and Troy VIIa. Troy VI developed into a major fortified center during the Late Bronze Age. Its sloping stone walls, defensive towers, and gates reveal a community possessing considerable organizational resources. The city maintained connections with the Aegean world, demonstrated through Mycenaean pottery and other evidence of exchange. Troy VI ended in a powerful destructive event that many archaeologists have associated with an earthquake around the end of the 13th century before Christ. Troy VIIa was constructed directly upon those ruins. Houses inside the city contained numerous large storage vessels buried beneath the floors, commonly interpreted as evidence that the inhabitants were storing food during a period of tension. This city was also destroyed near the end of the Bronze Age, around the end of the 12th century before Christ, according to many chronological systems. Carl Blegen proposed that the memory of the destruction of Troy VIIa may have become the historical foundation for the tradition of the Trojan War. Other scholars continued to debate whether that foundation should be connected with Troy VI Troy VIIa, or a composite memory formed from multiple periods. This debate itself helps us understand the true value of Hisarlik. Archaeology confirms that a major Bronze Age city existed at the location ancient tradition associated with Troy. That city possessed fortifications, residential districts, and connections with the Aegean region. Several of its layers experienced violent destruction during periods close to the age in which the ancient Greeks placed the Trojan War. These discoveries confirm the geographical and historical foundation behind the epic. Individual characters and individual battles still belong to the world of poetry. Archaeologists have not excavated a tablet recording that Achilles killed Hector, nor have they discovered a wooden horse inside the city gates. The identity of King Priam and the scale of the Achaean alliance remain subjects of debate. However, one important truth has become clear. Homer placed his story upon a real location. Hisarlik was once an important Bronze Age city. It stood precisely at the intersection between Anatolia, the Aegean, and the routes surrounding the Dardanelles. Its walls, gates, and many layers of destruction confirm that the memory of a fortified city at that location possessed a clear material foundation. Poetry preserved the name Troy within human memory before modern archaeology opened the layers of the ancient city at Hisarlik. That memory passed through many generations of oral tradition, absorbed details from different periods, and finally crystallized into one unified story. Homeric scholarship therefore commonly approaches the epics as products in which history, social memory, and performance art operated together, rather than treating them as either intact chronicles or works of fiction entirely separated from the past. This is precisely where Troy returns to the Dossier of Polyphemus. Troy proves that an epic story can preserve the memory of a real location across an extremely long period. It also demonstrates that this process of preservation always includes transformation. Cities built upon one another became a single Troy. Many conflicts may have crystallized into one war lasting 10 years. Warriors from different periods entered the same heroic generation. History provided the foundation, while poetry created the final form remembered by the world. Polyphemus may have passed through a similar process. An older memory concerning giants communities living outside the urban order or man-eating creatures may have traveled through many generations of storytelling. When that memory entered the Homeric world, it received a complete Greek form. Its supernatural origin was explained through Poseidon and Theusa. Its abnormal body was marked by the single eye. Its crime was placed within the violation of Xenia. Its location became an unfamiliar island along the homeward voyage of Odysseus. Homer transformed oral material into a character possessing a name, a genealogy, a voice, and a decisive role in the fate of the hero. This process reveals that creativity and memory can exist together within a single character. Homer created Polyphemus in the artistic sense. The oral tradition may have given him the skeleton of the story. When the Homeric Dossier returns to Enoch. From Hisarlik, the investigation returns to the texts that open the story of the giants. First, Enoch chapter 15 provides a distinctive explanation for the fate of the Nephilim. Their gigantic bodies were destroyed, while the spirits that emerged from those bodies continue to operate upon the earth. The text describes them causing suffering, oppression attacks, destruction, and conflict against humanity. They also carry an enduring hunger and thirst, even after leaving behind the physical mechanism of eating and drinking. Chapter 16 continues by establishing the period of activity of those spirits, from the time the giants were killed until the day of final judgment. Within the system of First Enoch, the death of the Nephilim ends the body, but prolongs the spiritual consequences. Genesis chapter 6 opens another door through the phrase, and also afterward. The Nephilim were present upon the earth in those days, and also afterward when the beings called the sons of God came to women and produced children. The sentence preserves a time span extending beyond the first moment of the story, while the mechanism of the period afterward remains outside the direct explanation of Genesis. Numbers chapter 13 carries the name Nephilim into the world after the flood through the testimony of the spies. In Canaan, they encounter the sons of Enoch and then declare that they have seen the Nephilim. They describe themselves as small as grasshoppers beside those people. Fear clearly influences the report. Yet the testimony still confirms that Israelite tradition connected the Anakim with the memory of the Nephilim. Other biblical books continue placing tall peoples upon a real map. The Anakim are associated with Hebron. The Amim are associated with Moab. The Zamzumim are associated with Ammon. The Rephaim are associated with Bashan and the king named Og. The biblical dossier therefore preserves memories of multiple communities possessing names, territories, and reputations for extraordinary stature after the time of Noah. The story then crosses the linguistic bridge of the Septuagint. The Jewish translators render Nephilim with the word Gigantes, bringing the mysterious figures of Genesis into a category of giants that Greek-speaking readers could recognize. Finally, Homer brings Odysseus to the Cave of Polyphemus. He possesses a supernatural origin. He belongs to a people called the Cyclopes. He lives outside any common council or legal system. He uses his physical strength to imprison human beings inside his cave. He tears apart and devours people who stand beneath the protection of the law of hospitality. When the four dossiers are placed side by side, a consistent pattern appears. First, Enoch preserves the origin and spiritual fate of the giants. Genesis expands the presence of the Nephilim through the phrase and also afterward. Numbers preserves the connection between the Anakim after the flood and the Nephilim. Homer creates Polyphemus as a giant possessing divine ancestry, superhuman strength, and the practice of consuming human beings. This pattern creates a textually grounded line of comparison. Direct genealogy remains the empty section of the dossier. First, Enoch never identifies Polyphemus as a Nephilim spirit embodied in flesh. Genesis never traces a bloodline from Hermon into the Aegean world. Numbers never records the Anakim leaving Canaan by sea. Homer never applies the names NEPHILIM Anakim or Rephaim to the Cyclops. The surviving evidence, therefore, confirms a proximity within the structure of memory rather than a complete biological sequence. This conclusion preserves both the strength and the accuracy of the investigation. Polyphemus appears as a Greek version of the ancient giant pattern, an origin touching the supernatural realm, a body overwhelming human beings. Power standing outside common law and hunger directed toward human flesh. His identity remains part of the Cyclopean tradition, but his echo extends far beyond the Greek world. Talks what Homer actually did. Homer did more than rename a creature. He brought a memory that may already have existed within the oral world into a new moral system. In 1st Enoch, the giants destroy the created order of God. In the Odyssey, Polyphemus destroys the order of hospitality protected by Zeus. The two cultures use their own religious language, yet both recognize the same principle. Strength separated from sacred law transforms the world into the stone cave of a predator. Polyphemus believed that the boulder across the entrance had granted him absolute power. He controlled the animals, the food, the space, and the exit. Odysseus possessed something the giant underestimated: the ability to observe, remember, exercise, restraint, and cooperate. The 6 survivors escaped from the cave because they raised the stake together, carried out the plan together, and concealed themselves together beneath the sheep. Victory belonged to intelligence connected through community, rather than strength isolated within one individual. That lesson still reaches you directly today. Modern human beings rarely stand before a one-eyed giant. But every age produces forms of power that believe their size, wealth, or capacity for control has placed them above moral boundaries. The boulder sealing the cave entrance may take the form of political power, technology, money, or fear. The hunger of Polyphemus also carries a meaning broader than the need for food. It is the desire to continue taking even after every basic need has been satisfied. A cave filled with milk, cheese, and livestock still becomes a place where human beings are devoured. First, Enoch constructs the same warning on the scale of the entire world. The giants consume the produce of humanity, devour human beings, and then pull all life into the cycle of violence. Their strength increases their hunger, while their hunger continually expands the reach of destruction. Both traditions place moral boundaries at the center of the problem. Strength-serving order creates protection. Strength-serving desire creates Polyphemus. The question concerning the historical origin of the Cyclops therefore leads toward a deeper question about human nature. Have the ancient monsters always stood outside the stone cave? Or do they also represent the uncontrolled form of power that can rise within every civilization? Troy provides one final warning. A city that stood through many generations was repeatedly destroyed and rebuilt. The layers of stone at Hisarlik rest upon one another like pages of history, each preserving the ambition, warfare, natural disaster, and efforts at recovery of the people who once lived there. Homer preserved Troy in poetry. Archaeology returned the site to the light. The confirmation of Hisarlik does not transform all of the Iliad into a historical chronicle, but it proves that poetry can preserve a geographical and historical core across an extremely long period. That same principle keeps the question of Polyphemus alive. A mythological story can contain a real memory. That memory can change its name, alter its form, and enter the divine system of another culture. Across many generations, a terrifying community can become a race of giants. An extraordinary warrior can become the son of a sea god. An unusual physical feature can develop into a single eye in the center of the forehead. Poetry preserves the feeling of the past, even after names and dates have faded. And now the ship of Odysseus has disappeared completely beyond the horizon. Polyphemus remains seated upon the rocky shore, one hand resting upon the blackened cavity of his eye. His voice calling to Poseidon merges with the waves and then travels with sailors back toward the harbors of the Greek world. With every retelling, the story continues to change, but the giant remains. The stone cave remains. The hunger remains. And behind that image, the Hebrew texts continue telling of another age, the age of the Watchers, the Nephilim, and the spirits that remained upon the earth after the gigantic bodies had died. Hisarlik has proven that the name Troy once existed upon real ground before modern archaeology opened the layers of the ancient city. Polyphemus still belongs to the world of epic poetry, but the similarity between him and the giant pattern found in Enoch and the Bible has created a question powerful enough to survive through generations. If poetry preserved Troy before the layers of the ancient city at Hisarlik were excavated, could Polyphemus also have originated from a real memory? The memory of the giants, whom the Hebrew world called the Nephilim. The ship of Odysseus finally disappeared beyond the horizon. Behind him, Polyphemus remained seated among the cold rocks along the shore, one hand resting upon the blackened cavity of his eye. His plea to Poseidon blended with the sea wind, then continued to live within the stories carried by sailors to harbors throughout the ancient world. Nearly 3,000 years have passed, yet that roar has never completely faded. It echoes in the Book of Enoch, where the giants devoured everything humanity produced, and then turned upon the very people who had fed them. It appears in Genesis through 4 mysterious words, and also afterward. It left its footprints at Hebron, where the Anakim made the spies feel as small as grasshoppers, then continued to appear in Bashan through the record of Og, the king who belonged to the remnant of the Rephaim. When Jewish translators brought the Hebrew Bible into the Greek world, they chose the word Gigantes to render Nephilim. Generations later, Homer led Odysseus into the cave of a Cyclops, possessing supernatural ancestry strength far beyond that of human beings, and a hunger directed toward the flesh of guests who were pleading for protection. These pieces form a pattern clear enough to deserve continued reflection. Yet the truth always deserves to be approached with both courage and humility. The ancient texts have not given us a complete genealogy connecting the Nephilim with Polyphemus. Homer keeps the one-eyed giant within the world of Poseidon and Thoasa. Enoch keeps the Nephilim within the rebellion of the Watchers. The Bible preserves the Anakim and Rephaim within clearly named territories. Each dossier stands firmly within its own tradition. When we place them beside one another, we see an ancient memory repeating across multiple cultures, supernatural power entering the human world, crossing sacred boundaries and transforming authority into violence. This is also the most important lesson left behind by the forgotten map. Polyphemus possessed enough strength to lift a boulder that many wagons could never move. He had livestock, food, shelter, and a powerful father ruling within the sea. Yet, he used every advantage to imprison, dominate, and devour those who were weaker. That choice transformed the stone cave into a prison. The strength of the Nephilim operated according to the same principle. Those beings received bodies extending beyond human limitations. Yet their strength produced no order. It expanded their hunger, intensified violence, and carried the world closer to judgment. These ancient stories remain valuable because that same mechanism continues to exist in our own age. Power always reveals its true nature through the way it treats those who are weaker. Knowledge always produces results corresponding to the purpose of the person who uses it. Resources can sustain a community, yet greed can transform those same resources into instruments of control. You do not need to enter a stone cave upon a distant island to encounter the world of Polyphemus. Wherever strength places itself above conscience, the boulder before the cave entrance has already begun to move. Odysseus escaped because he observed exercised restraint and cooperated with those who remained alive. His victory came through intelligence that respected limits rather than power operating through instinct. That is also the boundary separating a protector from a destroyer. Within the biblical tradition, True strength always serves the order of God. It protects life, preserves justice, and places responsibility above personal desire. When strength departs from that foundation, collapse begins from within, even while the body fortress or civilization on the outside still appears intact. Perhaps Polyphemus was simply a character perfected by the genius of Homer. He may also carry echoes of stories that once crossed the sea from the Levant into the Aegean world. Or at a deeper level, ancient cultures may have been preserving different versions of the same memory, the memory of an age when giants, terrifying warriors, and unusual bloodlines once filled their ancestors with fear. The answer remains buried beneath many layers of Earth language and legend. Yet that very gap keeps the investigation alive. History is sometimes written upon stone, sometimes it is inscribed upon ancient scrolls, and sometimes it survives within a story passed down for so long that the entire world forgets which part was mythology and which part began with a real event. If Troy lived within poetry before the layers of the ancient city at Hisarlik were brought back into the light, Polyphemus may also be preserving a fragment of memory that time has not yet allowed us to fully decipher. Until new evidence appears, the question remains: did the One-Eyed Cyclops belong only to the imagination of Homer? Or was the roar inside his stone cave the final echo of the giants whom the Hebrew world once called the NEPHILIM? Share your interpretation of this dossier in the comments. And if you would like to continue following ancient texts, lost cities, and the mysteries lying between the Bible history and mythology, join Kyros Codex in the next investigation. For now, farewell, and may the grace and peace of the Lord be with you today and forever.